Um, we're going live in 10 seconds.
Thanks, Mary.
Okay, we're live.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everyone. I think we're all here, but we'll find out soon. This is the Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022 meeting of the Carrboro Town Council. A lot of twos in there today. Welcome to everyone here in the room and in the waiting room. We've got several speakers with us tonight, so that's good to see. We'll start with a roll call by the clerk. Mary?
Mayor Damon Siles.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Susan Romaine.
Present.
Council Member Barbara Fouchie.
Present.
Council Member Danny Nowell.
Present.
Council Member Randy Haven O'Donnell.
Present.
Council Member Sammy Slade.
Present.
Okay, I think that's everyone. Thank you, Mary. We first have a proclamation, and I'm wondering, Mary, if Laura Janway is with us tonight or if we should proceed without her. I don't see her on the list.
I don't see her.
Okay, you can go ahead. Maybe we should do what we're supposed to do first, which is the poetry reading. So why don't we start there? And I welcome Fred Joyner over if he's joined us.
I don't see Fred either.
Yeah, I'm not seeing Fred either. And I don't have a poem to share, so wait until next time.
Make up a Tuesday poem.
I should carry one in my pocket. Okay, I do have a proclamation, as I mentioned. This is one that I heard from our environmental planner for the town of Carrboro, Laura Janway, about. This is a proclamation regarding Invasive Species Awareness Week, so I'll take just a couple minutes to read the proclamation. Whereas February 28th through March 4th, 2022 is National Invasive Species Awareness Week, and whereas the spread of invasive species decreases biodiversity, threatens the survival of native plants and animals through habitat loss, predation, and resource competition, and interferes with ecosystem functions by changing natural processes such as fire, nutrient flow, and flooding. And whereas native species perform flood mitigation, soil nutrient cycling, carbon sequestration, increase biodiversity and support food webs, possess adaptations to local conditions and providing savings on maintenance costs by requiring less water, pesticides, and fertilizers, decrease the threat of wildfire by supporting normal levels of fuel loading, and represent elements of the region's natural and cultural heritage. And whereas the costs of invasive species control and damage remediation reach $120 billion yearly in the United States, and whereas the town adopted its first ordinance against invasive species in 1999, and since that time has prohibited the use of invasive species as a method of complying with land use ordinance provisions for shading and screening, and has disallowed the inclusion of invasive species in any plans submitted in support of a land use permit application. And whereas on January 24th, 2017, the town council accepted the Community Climate Action Plan, which in part encourages the protection and enhancement of ecosystems. And whereas the town holds volunteer events to remove invasive species from municipal parks, and recently updated the town code to allow native plantings through managed natural landscapes. And whereas the town has encouraged the use of native species through educational film screenings, outreach events, and pollinator plant and milkweed seed giveaways through the Bee City USA initiative. Now, therefore, I, Damon Siles, Mayor of the town of Carrboro, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim February 28th through March 4th, 2022 to be Invasive Species Awareness Week in Carrboro. I also encourage residents to join upcoming efforts to support native species and remove invasive species during Orange County's Creek Week, which is March 12th to 19th. This, the 22nd day of February, 2022. And I just again want to acknowledge and thank Laura Janway for bringing this proclamation idea forward. And Randy, you have your hand up, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to come behind you, not only thank Laura, but I want to give a shout out to community folks, Barb Stenross and Stephen Feuerstein, who are just amazing volunteers in the invasives removals efforts. They continue that year round. Please join in and help with this. Many of us over the years have planted plants like English ivy that are invasive and we didn't even know it. Please take a look at the town website and see what are the native species, and we encourage you to help on the invasive species volunteer days. Thanks.
Thank you, Randy. Okay. Mary, it looks like our poet laureate, Fred Joyner, has arrived. So can we go ahead and bring him over? Hey, Fred.
Hello. How y'all doing?
Good. Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry to be a little bit late. Just the travails of the day, trying to keep it all together.
I get it. We always have time for you, though. So please.
Thank you so much.
Floor is yours.
I'm going to read a poem from this collection called Naked Genius. This is a collection of poems by George Moses Horton, who was an enslaved man. He was enslaved in this area in Chatham County, and became known as the Colored Bard of North Carolina. He read poems on the campus. He recited poems on the campus of Chapel Hill, and had students like write their poems down. He would recite these poems for students. And I was just recently, I was featured on Spectrum One News talking about George Moses Horton. And I thought, yeah, it would be good to read one of his poems. A very important literary character, not just in North Carolina, but in America. So I'll read this poem. It's kind of a sad poem, but I just, I thought that, this being Black History Month, that, a poet writing a poem to his mother, as somebody who was enslaved, who was probably separated from their parent. I think it was it's a really good moment to think about. It's called A Visit to My Mother's Grave. When zephyrs poured the doleful sound, like spirits from the funeral cave, I amid the dormitory found my mother's lonely grave. I must the hallowed spot endear beneath the swell of sorrow's grave. The scene awakes a filial tear, my mother's lonely grave. Let me hear dust with smiles rain, nor let my locks in sorrow lave, while bending o'er the sacred sign, my mother's lonely grave. My eyes were still in sorrow drowned, which bends the stout and stills the brave, and I in silence left behind my mother's lonely grave. Farewell, my dearest friend, awhile. I have no good on earth to crave. Oh thee, oh let me drop a smile, my mother's lonely grave. So this is a hard book to find. I'm in touch with the North Carolina Historical Society, and I think they're going to republish this, so hopefully it'll be available. But it's a very touching poem, and I think it's a powerful poem for us to think about. It's just a powerful poem for us to think about from a very important poet to Chapel Hill and Carrboro, to North Carolina, and to the United States. So thank you. Naked Genius is what it's called. It looks like that.
Thank you so much, Fred.
Sure. Thank you.
Appreciate the education about our local history too.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week, I hope.
Yep, I'll be here.
Great.
Well, good night. Have a good meeting.
Thank you. Okay. All right, we've heard a poem, we've heard a proclamation. Now is announcement of upcoming meetings. Mary?
Okay, on the 23rd, which is tomorrow at 6 p.m., there's a Racial Equity Commission meeting. And my calendar's acting wonky. And then next Tuesday is our next town council meeting at 7 p.m. And I know there are a couple of special meetings, but they're not on the actual town calendar. So I don't know if someone else wants to speak about those.
Thank you, Mary. I will mention that in addition to town council and board meetings, there are some Carrboro conversations coming up. This is a new initiative by town staff, which I'm really grateful for, led by town staff, on opportunities for residents to come and talk with staff about a variety of issues, including some important current topics like the 203 project, priorities for how we spend our American Rescue Plan Act funds, some upcoming stream cleanup efforts that the town is leading or is involved with, as well as further discussion about our recently approved plan for affordable housing and the use of town-owned land. Those sessions, there are a mix of virtual and in-person sessions coming. The first one is a virtual session on Wednesday, February 23rd, which is tomorrow, 7:30 to 9 p.m. You can go to the town website to find the link for that Zoom meeting. And then the other two sessions I believe are both in person and are on Thursday, this Thursday, the 24th. The first is from 10 to 11:30 in the morning. And the other is from 5:30 to 7 in the evening. Both are at Carrboro Town Hall on West Main Street. You can find more information about all of those sessions, again, on the town's website at carrboro.nc.gov. Are there, council members, are there other meetings coming up, town meetings coming up that we need to know about? Not seeing any. Great. Thanks again, Mary. All right, we do have a few comments from the public that I believe are not about matters not on our printed agenda. I have 3 people listed, although they can correct me if I'm wrong, if they're meant to be on something later in the agenda, but we'll go ahead and bring them over. The first, and I'll just go in order of how we received them. The first is, well, let me say first too, to all of the people we have speaking tonight, both on general matters as well as on matters on our agenda. As usual, we do ask speakers to try to keep their comments to about 3 minutes, just so that we can continue moving through the agenda and have time for everyone to speak. But on the first matter, which is general matters not on the agenda, we'll start with Diane Robertson, and then Mary after that. We'll go to Carrie Lennox, I think, not if I'm reading that correctly, and then Douglas McKay. We'll start with Diane. Diane,
Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I am in my car about 1 minute from my house. Would you allow the next speaker to speak so I can get
Sure, we can do that. Thanks, Diane.
my driveway?
Yes, we can do that.
Well, as soon as I am safe, I will let you know.
Okay,
Thank
sounds
you. Thank you.
We'll go on then to,
I don't see
have the wrong
Carrie.
glasses on, Mary, so I'm having trouble reading this small print.
Is that- I
Carrie
don't
Lennox.
see Kari or Douglas right now.
Okay. In that case, it looks like Diana Newton, who I have listed to speak, is wanting to speak on a matter not on our agenda. So can we go ahead and bring Diana Newton over? And after Diana Newton, Mary will bring over Casey Gordon. Diana, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Damon, and all council members. I'm not sure where the idea came from that I'm not speaking about a matter on the agenda because I didn't indicate what I was going to speak on. This is about the comprehensive plan.
Okay, that's what I thought it was about. So actually, Diana, we're going to keep those comments happening at the time of that agenda item.
Okay, that's great. I can just wait till then.
Great. So I'm assuming then that that's true also, Mary, of Casey Gordon's, who will also hold on to until that agenda item comes up. Okay. Casey, am I right? You're here to talk about the comprehensive plan, is that right?
No, I'm actually here to talk about stormwater, but not the particular agenda stormwater item that I was able to see on the website.
Okay, well then why don't you go ahead? You have about 3 minutes.
Okay, super. Thank you so much. So I live just upstream of the new development called Sanderway on Hillsborough Road. And part of this development entailed modifying the existing gravel Horn Hollow Drive and splits off a paved bike and pedestrian multi-use pathway that connects up to Autumn Drive behind my house. So this new paved bikeway elevated an existing stream crossing by about 8 to 10 inches relative to the way it used to be when it was just a little gravel drive. And I walked this with Council Member Randy Haven O'Donnell this weekend just to kind of show her what we were thinking about. So raising this path actually violates a condition that was imposed by the town on Sanderway. It was called additional condition number 33, that the construction plans demonstrate that where the northern segment of the multi-use path crosses the perennial stream, the existing elevations of the existing crossing will not be further raised, thereby preventing higher flood elevations for the properties upstream of said crossing. So that's us, upstream of said crossing. And so we're requesting that the path be restored to its original state from before this extra layer of roadbed and pavement were added on top of it, because we just can't have 8 to 10 more inches of rainwater backing up into our properties when there's heavy rain. So if there could be a study of these culverts and possibly also the downstream culvert of this one at Kate's Farm, that would be really useful to the residents that are upstream on this little tributary of the Bolin, because we just get a ton of water and the existing culverts aren't enough to move it downstream fast enough when we get, our newer and heavier and more frequent and more powerful storms. So that's just what I came here to request.
Thanks so much, Casey. I know that there have also been some emails between you and your neighbors as well with our town staff about both that particular issue from the development of that, as well as some other conditions on the permit and working through those issues with the developer before the plat is approved, I believe is the status. But Mr. Manager, it sounds like this particular issue of the raising of that pathway is still a problem that we need to make sure is addressed during that plat approval process. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, the staff is working on that. Yes.
Thank you.
So Casey, staff will be responding both to that concern, that specific one, as well as to the other conditions that there have been questions about from you and your neighbors, making sure that the developer abides by the conditions on the permit.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we really hope that this can be restored to the way it was and not just pay a fine and leave it like this, because that's going to be a lot of water. So I really appreciate that responsiveness from you all. And I'm happy to send any more documentation of floodwater or the sites with photographs if we need to. So I'll keep an eye on my email.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that to our attention. And I know I've been copied on, I think, on many of those emails, and I've been watching the staff's responses as well. So I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, and to the staff for continuing to be sure to pay attention to each of those issues as they check off the boxes on the plat.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Council Member O'Donnell for taking a walk with me this weekend. It was really nice to get to see you in person.
Great, thanks, Casey.
Good night,
Thanks
everybody.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, Mary, I think we can, at this point, bring Diane Robertson back over if she's still with us.
You can't. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, Diane.
Okay, I'm here. Thanks for accommodating me. I don't know. I'm trying to be visible. Am I visible? There I am.
There you are.
Thanks. Thanks for hearing me and giving me time to get home and not have to talk while I was going around the roundabout in Carrboro. I am here as an individual, as well as speaking for a number of people who you'll probably be hearing more from as the week goes on. We are coming here, or I am coming here with a concern about a proposed development on off Pathway Drive, and just thought I would read what we understand the history of this project to be, and to be clear that we are looking for win-win solutions on this, and we are not looking for an either-or solution that pits one set of concerns against another. In 1999, the town of Carrboro planned to sell the Pathway Drive parcel to a developer to help finance the purchase of the land that became the MLK Park. Neighborhood Action stopped that plan by working with the town to find alternative sources of funding for the land purchase. It was a win-win, getting citizens involved in working with the town to find the best solution to something all could agree was desirable: the MLK Park and the preservation of green space in the Fair Oaks, Spring Valley neighborhoods. We want to recall that history now to urge the town to work with the neighborhood once again to find creative ways to address affordable housing issues along with preserving green space. We're calling on the town to not move forward with any decision on the Pathway parcel before engaging in a substantive and extensive consultation with the people living in the communities directly affected. And I would add here, directly affected also would mean the collateral impact of the larger Carrboro community, as we understand many of the issues that would come forth with this. Over 50 people turned out for a meeting this past Saturday that was called very late and very impromptu, with Town Council member Randy Haven O'Donnell. The community interest is high, as is the recognition that there are two goods here. We want to work toward making sure that one of these goods isn't sacrificed in the name of the other. And others will speak to this as there are other meetings set up to address this, and there will be a more extensive document that will be submitted for the town council and the staff to consider around this issue. But primarily, we want to make sure that we are asking for, we know this is a short meeting, we are asking for a comprehensive meeting with town manager, the mayor, and staff to talk more about this before moving forward with anything. So that's my comment for tonight, and I appreciate you hearing me and look forward to talking with you all again.
Thanks so much, Diane, for reading that statement. And I think just for folks listening, this is relating to the process that the council adopted last week, the week before, in terms of how the town would go about considering certain town-owned parcels around the community for potential affordable housing opportunities. And as Diane mentioned, one of those properties is the Pathway Drive property. So certainly the very beginning of that process was meant to be all about engaging community. And so I appreciate, Diane, you also echoing the importance of that kind of engagement. And Mr. Manager, you've heard Diane's comments, and I know you'll be passing that along to staff. Barbara, your hand is raised. Please go ahead.
Yeah, it is. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Diane, for coming in with your concerns, as well as concerns from the community. And I just want to go back to Town Manager White's email, which I think has gone out to everyone. Am I correct, Mr. White? It's been distributed to the council as well as our neighbors in and around the parcels that are under discussion. And so I think we're all prepared to have that very extensive community engagement. It was part of the email that was sent out. And so, yeah, so we look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. again, for echoing the importance of that process that the council laid out with staff's assistance, and focusing on that very early pre-step that we're in right now. And I appreciate the staff and Richard sending that document out to folks. I think it was very helpful for kind of keeping us all having the same understanding of what that process entails. Okay, I believe, let me get back to my notes here. I don't think we've had this other person on my list come in, but let me just check. I don't see Carrie Lennox or Douglas McKay. Mayor, are you seeing either of those folks? No. Okay. All right. Then we will move on to the consent agenda. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Find my agenda here. The first item on consent agenda is the approval of minutes from the January 18th, 2022 meeting. The next item is the Fire Department monthly report. This is to provide the town council with a monthly overview of calls for service. The next item is the Police Department monthly report. The purpose of this item is to provide a brief overview of calls for service for the month of January. The next item is the Police Department quarterly equity report and traffic stop policy update. The purpose of this agenda item is to provide the town council with a brief overview of the quarterly equity report for the fourth quarter of 2021 and an update on the traffic stop policy. Item number 5 is the stormwater utility monthly report. The purpose of this item is to provide the monthly update regarding stormwater utility projects and initiatives. And the final item, number 6, is the economic development monthly report. And the purpose of this item is to provide a regular monthly activities and status report.
Thanks, Richard. I have Barbara and then Sammy.
Thank you, Mayor. So can we hold off on the minutes until next week?
Sure. If that's
Thank
okay
you.
with everyone else.
If that's okay with everybody. Yeah, I don't know how never mind. Yeah, so next week will be good. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Sammy, is there anything you want to pull?
Yeah, I'd like to pull the quarterly report, please.
Which one? Oh, the police department?
The police departments.
Okay, so that's items, we're going to hold off on items 1 and 3. Can I have a motion to approve items 2, 4, 5, and 6?
So moved.
Second.
Sorry, Damon, it's item 4. There's 2 police department reports.
Sorry, 4.
All right.
Motion to approve items 2, 3, 5, and 6. Thanks, Sammy. Motion by Randy, second by Barbara, I believe. All in favor, we'll take a roll call vote. And that is going to go first with Barbara. Say aye. Please say aye if you approve of the motion, or no if you don't.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Randy?
Yeah, hi.
Danny?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
And I vote aye. The matter passes unanimously. And so we will hold off on the first item, Mary, until next week or in the next opportunity. And item number 4 is the police department quarterly report. Sammy.
Yeah, is it possible to get the slides up, Mr. Manager? Or I could also share my screen if y'all are okay with that.
Are you looking for slides from the report?
Yeah, the quarterly report, the equity police department equity report.
Let's see. Okay.
Is there staff here to present on that item or not, or Mr. Manager?
I'm not certain, but I'll see if I can find it on my screen to share it. Let's see.
Thank you.
Are you able to see the document? Is this the document you need?
Yes, that's the correct one. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Could you take it to the page where it shows the equipment stop rates, please? That one should suffice. That's it right there. Okay, great. Thanks. I just wanted to express gratitude to our police department for coming up with the traffic stop policy. As clearly this report shows, in our last quarter, we do have a proportionality issue, and this report was done before staff appears to have adopted at the beginning of this year. So I look forward to seeing that pie chart reflect more accurately the actual demographics of the people that drive through Carrboro, because currently it's showing BIPOC getting stopped at 2.5 times the rate that white are getting stopped. Mr. Manager, could you also go down to the one showing citations? I think it's a couple slides. Yeah, enforcement action. On this slide, I want to highlight something that is really for us to figure out how to fix. If you look at the green bars, comparing citation and warning, the green bars show that white are getting warnings 3 times per each citation, and then you look at the for black, they get warnings 2 times for every citation, and then for Hispanic, it's 1 to 1. So clearly, there's an issue in the way that those decisions are being made, and I would like for our chief to share what his thoughts are in that regard. And I don't know if he's available tonight for that, Mr. Manager.
Well, I'm here.
Hey, Chief, how are you?
Hey, good evening. Sure.
Let me just interrupt before you start, Chief. Just to note that if you feel like this is something you can respond to now, that's great. But also know that, again, this being a consent item, if you need some time to get more information for Sammy or the rest of us, that's fine too. But please go ahead.
Thank you. I was actually going to say I can't speak directly to this quarter's data, so I've actually jotted down here to pull data and see. I will tell you that some of the skews in the past, not again with this specific data, but just in my experience, a lot of it has to do with the severity of the violation. So we can pull that information and find out. An example would be if someone was stopped for, say, 10 miles an hour over, you would probably expect a warning. But if they were stopped for 30 miles an hour over the speed limit, you would probably expect a citation. So I've seen in the past where sometimes some of that skew is going to be explained by severity of offense, but I can't speak to this one directly, and I've got it down to look in it, so I'll be looking at it.
Great, thank you. Looking forward to hearing what you find. And then, Mr. Manager, if you could scroll up to the next slide, which shows the search productivity. On that one, of searches, it looks like most of them, there's no contraband found. I'm very curious to understand what kind of drugs are found of the 6 that are there and kind of quantities. As we all know, nationally, there's an understanding that marijuana is not the big problem that it has been known to be in the past. And Carrboro being a progressive town, I just want to make sure that we're not enforcing something that looks like is not so significant, that we've held isn't so significant. And now that we have the benefit of many states and even our president considering making it legal, I don't want folks to be caught up on something so antiquated. So if you, when you get a chance, Chief, you could share what the breakdown is of those drugs found, I'd appreciate it. And thank you so much again for the new policy on stops. I look forward to seeing what the effect might be there.
Thanks for those questions, Sammy. And Chief, thanks for being here. Good to see you. Barbara, you're next, and then we'll go to Susan.
Oh, you can go ahead to Susan. I just have a follow-up about a couple of things on the consent agenda. So it can work. Susan can go ahead. Thank you, Mayor.
You're up, Susan.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chief. Thank you for being with us. And so one comment about the reports, I too really appreciate this new policy that's gone into effect. So thank you for making all of that happen. And then I have another question that's really not directly related to the reports, other than it sort of gets at the workload that the police department is under right now. I know that there have been some vacancies. I'm trying to think, maybe two council meetings ago, we did approve a increase in the entry-level salaries from, I think, 42 to 46,000, I believe. And I'm curious if that is helping in terms of increasing applicants for the vacancies, and if you anticipate any hirings in February or even into March.
Thank you for your question. So first and foremost, let's say thank you for your support. It's been an interesting couple of years to be in law enforcement, and we've seen nationally, we've seen statewide, the amount of people going into law enforcement has dropped precipitously. So thank you all for your support on that. I know that we're in a pinch. I was here I've been here since 1999. We had the tech boom of 2001, and we were significantly short at that time. But we have never been this short before. We are currently 9 officers short. I anticipate by July 1st, we will be 12 based on retirements. Every application that comes in, we jump on it and we chase it down. And we have always had a vision to look a little bit wider, maybe look at people a little bit harder to see if there's a diamond in the rough there. But at the end of the day, sometimes we really are not getting qualified applicants, and that's not us, that's everywhere. And that's one of the biggest challenges we have. Couple that with, we have a looming retirement issue coming up in the next 4 to 5 years. So we've got a lot of work to do. The manager and I are working on a plan to kind of enhance our recruitment efforts. We've tried to figure it out, but the bottom line is we've had a significant reduction overall statewide in people who are trying to come into this job. So that's kind of the challenge one of the challenges that we're facing right now.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that the salary increase for the entry level positions, has that helped in terms of bringing in a few more applicants, or it's not really having much of an impact?
So I think it just happened. We have been going out to basic law enforcement training schools to recruit, and that's how we generally recruit. So I would say it's probably too close to really know if that has an effect. Part of that is publicizing it, and that's one of the issues we've had, is that our social media expertise has been relegated to a patrol stance. So they're not in a position where they would have that development. So that's another hurdle we're trying to figure out, is who is our social media? How is our presence? How are we recruiting? How are we getting that message out there? But I think you're seeing, I just was actually looking at a website. Raleigh is proposing a 12% increase in starting pay. I mean, so this is statewide, this is nationwide. And throw in the Great Resignation, throw in inflation, and it's a historical event. It's a challenge. What I worry about is running my people into the ground. I run calls. I answer calls for service. My folks do, and I worry about sustainability. And so I'm excited that Mr. Manager has said that we're looking at a pay and compensation. Sorry, it's been a long day. Study, and that would be across the organization. But I think specifically we're really struggling in law enforcement. So ideas, thoughts that anyone has for non-traditional recruitment ideas, I'm all ears. I will try to find the diamond in the rough because it takes a special person to be a law enforcement officer here in Carrboro, and that person sometimes can be hard to find. So
I know it's it's a special time, and I read the I think it was an NNO article from a couple of weeks ago where you are referencing there is an increase in guns, there's an increase in violence, gun-related incidents here in Carrboro. Some of this maybe is related to the pandemic, with more people under more stress, certainly maybe more substance abuse. So there's a lot going on at a time that you were very understaffed. So anyway, just to say, hang in there, and we hope we can support you heading, in the coming months.
Thank you. I think I will, the problems I have here as the chief, I'm grateful for because we have good people. And I think that's the core of a good culture of service. And so we are not perfect. We are a work in progress like anything else, but thank you everybody for the support and the community support. And, you know, we want to provide the best service we can, but we're also ultimately human at the end of the day. And there is a toll in that with the situation we're in. So, but thank you for the support.
Okay, Chief ATAC, thanks for being with us this evening. Barbara, did you have a question on this topic, on this agenda item?
I had a comment and a real short comment. Thank you, Chief, for coming in. And yours is a difficult job as chief. And police officers have a difficult job. It's just the state of policing right now. And I think, you know, that we all understand and recognize that. I just wanted to ask, I appreciate the report too, and the new policy and sharing that with us. Will you continue to come in periodically and just talk, you know, because sometimes there's, you know, there's changes going on, you know, we got this new policy this time and then staffing, you know, it would be helpful, I know, for me and probably to my colleagues, you know, to see you periodically. I mean, policing is, I mean, it's on fire in some ways, right? And just a lot of change going on. So I would appreciate hearing from you every now and then.
Yes, I remember. I believe it was your comment in the fall, and just asked that I would check in every little bit. So I'm very much willing
Here
to do
I
that.
am again, Chief.
And thank you. And yes, and thank you for the ask, because I think a lot of understanding is communication, and I think maybe my speaking as my work in general, sometimes we're suspicious of sharing and transparency. So I am not. You know, there's some ugly to law enforcement. But I think, you know, I have a vested interest and we have a vested interest in getting things right. And I think that is a critical conversation, you know, and sometimes it's a mind bender, including for myself. You know, I speak personally. But I think, you know, there are legitimate concerns about, again, it's the concept of harm and harm reduction. That's been the whole thing that got me thinking. And so these are legitimate issues to figure out. No, I will come here. You let me know. And actually, I have a couple of things. If you have just a moment that I jotted down, to talk about this traffic stop policy, just to kind of sum it up, but also to tell you what's next. I'm not doing like a Netflix series. I'm not trying to lure you in, but there is a what's next. So if this is the time for it, it's just a few comments. If there are other questions that you'd like to get to first, whatever works for the council.
What do you think, Mayor? Or do you want this to go to another time?
Yeah, let me ask the manager what he would like to do. We are running a little over on our agenda right now. So
yes, thank you, man. It's on the consent agenda. How about we come back to you to a more formal presentation if that's what you're interested in doing?
Okay.
Yeah, we're fine with that. It's fine with that.
Thank you.
Chris, thank you so much for being here tonight. And it's good to hear from you as always. Is there a motion to approve this item?
So moved. Thank you, with gratitude to our chief and the work of our police department.
Thank
you, everybody. Thank you.
Moved by Sammy and seconded by Barbara that we approve this item on the consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye. Barbara?
Aye.
Randy?
Aye.
I know that Danny had a technical issue and had to drop off and will be back soon. So we'll see if he makes it in the next 15 seconds. But Susan?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
Damon votes aye, and that's an unexcused absence by Councilmember Nowell, so it will be counted as I assume, as an affirmative vote. So the matter passes unanimously. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Mr. Manager.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor, and not for Chief ATAC. I just had a couple more things. I just wanted to express gratitude for Chief Smith's a pretty extensive fire department monthly report. I can see that he's kind of changed the format to include more information, and the same for stormwater. I saw some new items in there, some things that they're embarking on, and so I just wanted to acknowledge both of those. And that was all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Okay, we've gotten through the consent agenda. As I mentioned, council members, we're running a little bit over on our agenda, but that's okay. we'll get there. We do have our big item for tonight. We have two more big items. The first one is a public hearing on the comprehensive plan, which I'm very excited about. And then we have several folks from the community here to speak. I'm hoping that Councilmember Nowell will be back with us very soon, but I don't want to delay too much further. So, Mr. Manager.
I apologize if I missed it, but was there a vote on the police department report that was pulled off for discussion?
Yes, it was moved by Sammy, seconded by Barbara, and approved unanimously.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay. The next item is the public hearing. This is the public hearing, continued consideration of Carrboro Connects, the 2022 through 2042 comprehensive plan. The first agenda item is for the town council to hold a public hearing and continue to receive public comment and consider adoption of a draft comprehensive plan, Carrboro Connects 2022 through 2042. Now I'll turn over to Trish McGuire, our planning director.
Okay. Mary, will you bring, I think we have Trish McGuire, Ben Berelsheimer from planning, as well as Francie Salinger Lawrence and Scott Goldstein from the consultants. We're all going to be coming over. And I'm going to see if I can get a hold of Danny.
There he is.
He's here, Damon. I mean, Mayor.
All right.
So sorry about that, y'all. Just had to unplug the router.
Okay. Thanks, Danny. You made it just in time. We just brought over Trish from planning, and Trish, welcome. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to see all of you. Good evening. Mayor, council, and manager. We really appreciate your time and attention. I know Mary is bringing over two more folks to assist this evening. I do have 10 slides to run through to prepare you for your continued consideration of the draft plan. If it's okay, I'll go ahead and share the screen.
And Trish, while you're doing that, I'm just going to say, just for the benefit of folks in the audience who are waiting to speak, that we'll receive this presentation and we'll have some, I guess, some discussion, but comments from the public will be a part of this hearing, an important part of this hearing. So we'll be getting to them shortly after this presentation.
Absolutely. Thanks again for your time and attention this evening. You all have received a lot of materials in your packet, and a lot has happened since November 16th when we were in front of you for the first public hearing on this draft plan. Go ahead. And our plan for this evening is to make a brief presentation, provide information on the current status of the draft and the next steps. We anticipate that you'll receive public comment and then discuss the items that you hear about tonight, as well as the materials that we've provided in the packet. We do have a draft resolution that allows you to direct us regarding revisions to the draft plan as we work towards finalizing it. We did include in the packet attachment F, which is the timeline. It takes us back to mid-2020 when we kicked off this effort, and it seems like just yesterday, but working with Tesca Associates, CNT, and Teresa Lockamy, and most importantly, the Carrboro community, to engage in visioning the future and strategizing about how to achieve those visions. Everything that's in the plan is a result of engagement with the community and input that has been received during the process. Just to run over briefly, the materials we did include in the packet are that resolution I mentioned a moment ago. The draft plan itself was also attached, again, dating to November 16th. There were no changes to that version of the plan. That's why we didn't print out new copies for those of you who had received paper copies. We've included the attachment, public comments that have been received since November 16th via the website or directly through the town public comment email. And there have been a few more public comments received since the packet went out on Friday. I believe those have gone directly to you as well. We have included the advisory board recommendations And from their review following, you're referring it to advisory boards on November 16th. Staff comments, and then, as I mentioned, a timeline of the process we've been through so far. So as I noted, we haven't changed the draft since November 16th. So this is the version of the document that everyone has been looking at and commenting on. The past 3 months have provided time for the community advisory boards and the staff to dig in on this current draft and provide final input into this process. Based on the direction you provided at the last hearing, we did send it back to the Carrboro Connects task force and the advisory boards. The task force met a 9th time, and almost all of the advisory boards and commissions reviewed the draft and have submitted recommendations to you. We've continued to reach out to familiar faces and voices, to such as El Centro and the Refugee Community Partnership and many others who we've contacted and communicated with during this process. While at the same time, we've also tried to engage new voices as well. The task force's role as the eyes and ears of you and the community in this process has been a great and critical pairing with the community to spread the word and seek engagement, and has supported the variety of efforts that we've used to bring people to the table to discuss the community's future. So this is also, as you know, overlapped a little bit with the ARPA outreach that the town has been doing, the community survey, lots of engagement for One Orange as well. So there's been, and prior to that, the recovery plan, lots of engagement has been going on in our county recently. And it's great to see the comprehensive plan already informing some of those other efforts, and we expect vice versa as well. So one of the additional things that has occurred since November 16th is the adoption of One Orange, and specifically it's the equity analysis evaluation tool and the pillars that are outlined in that document that are expected to serve as the foundation for work as we move forward, especially as we move into the implementation stage for this plan for Carrboro. The public hearing process itself allows for continued consideration of comments towards incorporating revisions and then preparing a final draft. You'll note, as I mentioned, attachment C is the public comments, and then attachment D, the 104 comments from advisory board members, advisory boards and commissions. A number of those are their recommendation statements. Many are a variety of forms. We've put them in order, in the order that they show up they refer to in the plan, in chronological order, if you will, numerical order, so that it's easy for you to go through, for all of us to go through and talk about them. We have not prioritized them or classified them in other ways, but you will have noted in reading through that some of them do identify that there may be a question for the council to discuss in relation to a comment that's been offered. We did rephrase some of them to turn them into an action, what seemed to be kind of a slightly clearer action to incorporate an edit into the plan. So we've offered that as consideration in that table of those comments for you as well. Finally, the actions we're looking at for you all tonight are to consider the comments in these attachments and decide what you want to do next with them in terms of directing us to incorporate them in. The staff and the consultants have reviewed all of them and believe that most are pretty straightforward changes to incorporate and can reasonably include it in the next draft. We've not identified any major conflict points with the comments that have been received that are included in the packet. Our plan all along has been to make sure that Carrboro Connects is integrated into other efforts. And of course, as I mentioned already, this includes the One Orange Racial Equity Plan. We believe the implementation component of the comprehensive plan is the great opportunity to continue to further our work to advance racial equity in a very specific and direct way. You'll note that we did mention the need to refine the metrics, and you will have noted in some of the comments, some of the boards made a recommendation, and staff for some metrics to be some specific language or excuse me, specific numbers related to metrics. We are asking that you provide us feedback on the feedback that you've received on that, and then also provide direction about those metrics to us so that we can make useful, measurable, replicable metrics that are very helpful in advancing the implementation of this plan. There is still some text in the draft plan. It's in red. The page numbers are noted here that was listed in the agenda item. This is a place where there was sort of a couple differing perspectives on the specific language. So we've drawn attention to it so you can advise us as to whether or not you want to select a particular framing or handle it in some other fashion. As we have mentioned before, our expectation has been that when we bring the final version forward to you, you will have a resolution to re-adopt some other plans that have already been adopted. One Orange is so recent, that one may be in the list or not. I think it will be for you all to decide as you direct us. But the Economic Sustainability Plan from 2017, the climate action plans in their entirety, again, while you did that in 2020, just to make it very clear in a blanket way what the bundle of policies that the town should and staff and the community should look to when we're discussing, work plans, budgets, et cetera. So we do expect that will be included in that final action for you. Our next step is to work to reformat the document once we've included all of the edits that you identify, to reformat the document to improve its design and readability, as well as improve its accessibility to the maximum we can. The executive summary will be our plan is to provide that in English and in Spanish, and we'll be using all of the tools we have under the approach that we've defined for this document to enhance ADA accessibility as well. So our next steps are for you all to hear public comment tonight and provide us direction on the totality of that and the incorporation of revisions into the draft, the current draft. We've identified 2 dates coming up, one in April and one in May, for further consideration and discussion and hopefully action on the draft plan. Our legislative deadline is July 1st, 2022. And with that, I think that's my last slide. Happy to answer questions or as you wish me to do.
Thank you very much, Trish. It's a great, helpful overview of where we are in the process. And we do have several folks with us tonight to speak on this topic. Before we do that, though, I see that Barbara's hand is up, and I don't know if that's a legacy hand or a current hand. Barbara?
No, I was just gonna ask Trish about the 2 dates. And certainly we'll hear public comment tonight, and we'll talk, about, whatever it is we need to talk about, some of the things that you mentioned in the presentation. So you'll hear some from us tonight, but I don't know that you'll hear all, I guess. So I'm just trying to figure out about those 2 dates. Like I know July 1 is it. For us, it's June, prior to our last meeting. And so I'm just trying to figure out the expectation on those 2 dates. Are you expecting everything tonight? Like what? Because I just feel like I won't have it.
Sure. Great question.
Thank you.
$64,000 question. Well, I think we noted in the agenda abstract that it's about a 6-week turnaround for what we think it will take, TSCA and CNT to incorporate everything in. Between now and April 19th, I think it's about 8 weeks. So we have a little bit of time beyond now to continue to receive direction. And I see Scott's on the screen now, so he can also, he or Francie can help with this answer. But it's about 6 weeks we need to make sure we get your comments and changes incorporated. We had anticipated that when we selected April 19th, but understand that, you all need time to think and process too. So would you add anything to that, Scott or Francie?
No, just to reinforce what you said, that we would like clear direction before we make the edits. So, we'll work with the process that you set up in order to provide a real comprehensive undertaking of all the edits that we expect to come into the process.
So April 19th would be like the date to give ample time, I guess.
I think we
April
should
19th and May 10th. Is that what it was?
Yeah, April 19th was actually anticipating that you would spend tonight and perhaps another, week or as much as maybe 2 weeks and finish up then. And we would be able to make the edits. But, and then if you needed to continue your conversation, et cetera, it took us to May 10th. But if you want to set a date between now and it would be sooner than April 19th, I think, to make sure we get everything in so it doesn't interfere with the budget adoption and other things like that. So
got it. I understand. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trish.
You're welcome.
Scott. Okay, so just as I mentioned, we do have several members of the public here to share their own thoughts about the comprehensive plan draft, and I'll just maybe add some emphasis to what I think was the overall gist of Trish's presentation, which is that we are in a process now, that we are not adopting anything tonight. We are considering all of the great comments we've received from the public, as well as from all of our many advisory boards who've had a chance to review the draft comprehensive plan document, and receiving additional comment, as we have done up through today, from people via email and tonight through public comments. So we have several people waiting in the waiting room, and I'll say to those who are listening that, again, we generally ask that people try to keep their comments to no more than about 3 minutes. I have a list of people who contacted us ahead of time about wanting to speak on this agenda item, and those people are Bob Proctor, Ed Larson, who actually will be speaking via a pre-recorded video shared by Professor Proctor tonight, Linda Hawk, Patrick McDonough, Lisa Bennett, and Nathan Jorgensen. So those are the people who I've signed up. If there are other people in the audience, and also Diana Newton, sorry about that. I had moved up to that other list. If there are other people in the audience who do wish to speak on this agenda item tonight, I hope that you will use the raise hand feature in Zoom to let me know that, and I'll get to you as we proceed through the public hearing. But we're going to start with Bob and Ed. Bob, welcome.
Hello, hi. I'd like to share my screen so I can display a map.
Okay, we see your screen.
Okay, great. So here's the map that was in the first draft that showed the priority areas for a new park. It was prepared by the Trust for Public Lands. It gave weight to criteria like density and urban heat islands. Its dark purple, very high priority area covered dense areas south of Maine. But in the second draft, this map was replaced by a simplistic 10-minute watershed map. Now, the word equity appears 180 times in the plan, but the watershed map needs much more work to ensure that new parks are fairly distributed, because there's now a sentence saying any home within 10 minutes of any existing park is at a low priority. The apartments near Carrboro Plaza are within 10 minutes of Simpson Park. It's just a playground. The low-income homes behind the cement plant are near Brewer Park. It's just a basketball court. MLK has a fancy playground, a pump track, nice restrooms, 2 picnic shelters, a mini amphitheater, and a community garden. The natural space needs for the folks crammed onto Fidelity are not met by town commons. There are no large trees, It's next to a noisy car wash, a busy street, and 2 hot parking lots. It's little more than 1 acre. Only 43% of that is natural and minimally healthy. The other 57% is pavement, bare earth, or bark chips without trees. The center, truly grassy area is less than 1/3 the size of Harris Teeter. It can't be used for 1/4 of each weekend, and it has to be shared by 400 neighbors. This table in the Parks chapter lists how many park acres per 1,000 residents American towns have. Walkability alone won't give equity. How many people have to share a park? How many facilities does a park contain? The new sentence should read, project would increase access to parks and natural spaces which are equitable both with respect to nearby acres per 1,000 population served and to population per nearby facility available. Okay, thanks. And then I'm not sure whether Ms. Bryant or I are supposed to play the video from Ed Larson.
Thank you, Bob. Why don't we check with the clerk? Mary, do you have that video pulled up? Andy?
Well, I was going to see if he could play it. If not, I can.
I have it handy.
It looks like you're ready.
Let me see if the audio comes through.
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay. Let me know if you can hear it.
Hi there. My name is Edward Larson. I'm a former resident of Fidelity Street. Directly across.
Bob, yeah. Keep that turned up, Bob.
Oh, hold it. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't know this volume was crucial. Let me start it over again. He has a very deep voice. Sorry about that.
All right, go ahead and leave the volume on this time because it was perfect before.
Oh, you can hear. Okay, good. I'm not sure I'm doing it the best way.
Hi there. My name is Edward Larson. I'm a former resident of Fidelity Street, directly across from the proposed expansion of the cemetery, which I oppose. I'd much prefer that space be some sort of shared, useful space for the residents of that area. Park space and useful space for walking dogs is in short supply in that end of town. And I strongly hope that it can be preserved as a natural area for everyone to enjoy. Thanks very much.
If I could add, he, can you hear me?
Yep.
He now lives in Whispering Hills. He told me that when he lived in 400 Davie, he would often go over to the open space to meditate, which I believe Danny Noel once told me as well, and myself. Okay, thanks.
Great. Thanks very much for your comments, Bob, and thanks to Mr. Larson by extension. And Bob, if you would end your screen share too, that would
right. Okay. Is it gone?
Thanks so much. Okay, Madam Clerk, we're going to move on to our next speaker, who is Linda Hawk. And after that will be Patrick McDonough.
Who did you say next? I'm sorry.
Linda Hawk, H-A-A-C. And after Linda will be Patrick McDonough. Okay, Linda, you're with us now, so if you want to unmute, as usual, welcome, and you have about 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm trying to get my video. All right. So I want to talk about the transportation and mobility part of the comprehensive plan, since I'm a former longtime member of the Transportation Advisory Board and a former chair. And I did participate in the planning in the terms of, I took the survey early on and also worked with your PR person. I mean, I had a long discussion with her. Overall, well, from what I could look at, I looked at the whole plan in detail. I mean, it's a huge plan and a lot of work, and I thank you all for that. There, as a writer, there was at least one place and perhaps two where I think the language is not precise enough for what you need to do in terms of matching to both the new bike plan and to a resolution that you've done in the past. And that is under the, I think it's under the transportation strategic map. I'm not sure I have it's not easy to go through this if you're just a regular citizen. But anyway, there are a list of priorities, and one of them is about Carolina North Forest. And you have something about continuing initiatives related to travel. I don't have it right in front of me, but that language is vague enough that it brings in to question not only what the new bike plan says, but also the resolution about not addressing phases 3 and 4 until there is a way for the community to talk about it. And also brings in the possibility of issues related to the community. I know Trish said that there were familiar voices and faces and new voices, but I do know that, or I have heard that neighborhoods, and particularly in Northern Carrboro, are not specifically reached out to in terms of the plan, and that might be a very good thing to do. So I would change that under O to continue to pursue a rails to trails possibility, which is what is in the new bike plan. And is in further in other parts of the transportation part. The other thing was, and I don't know where it is now, there was a quote by a participant at one point in there about extending greenways in this Carolina North area. And again, that brings up a lot of community dissension. And as far as I know, that's not the overall community feeling. And I know I had quotes about not doing that. So I know those weren't included. So I don't know why that particular quote was highlighted, at least at one point. And those are, I think, my main points.
Great. Thank you so much, Linda. And just a note there, you're perfect timing. Just like spot on with the 3 minutes. I love it.
That's what debate team will do for you.
That's right. Thank you for sharing those comments. And I know I saw Trish McGuire taking notes as you were speaking, and as our consultants are as well, about this comment about making sure that we're being kind of consistent between this planning document and our other adopted documents that we've recently updated. So thanks for that, Linda. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
You too.
Okay, bye.
Next up, we're going to go with, I believe, Patrick McDonough. And then after Patrick, we'll hear from Diana Newton. Patrick, welcome. You've got about 3 minutes or so.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor and Council, to actually make progress towards racial equity and climate action in Carrboro, where our resources are relatively limited, we will need to plan for the town to grow more dense within our current borders. This plan, while great effort has been put in, is not bold enough yet. First, only 67 acres or so within the town limits are slated for considerable growth. This is less than 2% of our acreage. And even if all 67 acres were developed at 16 to 24 units per acre in residential density, Carrboro would grow at about 8.8%, nearly identical to the last 10 years. And this is a recipe for keeping the affordable houses crisis on the same trajectory. I request that you ask the staff in TESCA to return with a scenario that identifies 350 to 450 additional acres as potential locations to receive growth of some type. We need this tax-based growth to help pay for the ambitious and worthy goals in this plan on climate action, racial equity, and affordable housing. Our plan policies themselves are not bold enough. This plan still mentions planning for parking decks downtown, which is the opposite of climate action. It's business as usual. The plan fails to eliminate parking requirements downtown, an accomplishment that not only Raleigh and Durham have done, but Graham, North Carolina has done. The plan doesn't identify completing the Bowling Creek Greenway as a clear goal, something that's very important to many of us in the community. Next, this plan suggests studying things that we already know the answers to. We know that parking requirements make affordable and market rate housing both more expensive. We know that setbacks, minimum lot sizes, and floor area ratio limits do the same. Our plan isn't saying we are going to end single family only zoning to increase equity by amending these regulations. It talks about we'll study them. That's not action. Fourth, the plan equivocates too much. If you read the beginning part of Land Use Strategy 2.2b and put them together, it is to determine whether the town should investigate creating a new overlay district. This is a recipe for not doing things. I'm asking, please convert as many of the whether we do statements in this plan to how we do statements. We will do statements. I'm going to close with this. We built more multifamily housing between 1985 and 1989 than we did in the next 30 years combined in Carrboro. Those units are the most affordable ones in town today. We need to build up now so that those new buildings can get older and more affordable. We need to let lower income and smaller households come together and form density teams so they can, occupy expensive land in 6 units on an acre, 8 units on an acre. Recently, a group of us led a missing middle housing tour through the Davy Poplar neighborhood, and you can find a 6-plex, a 4-plex, an 11-plex, and a whole bunch of accessory dwelling units in that neighborhood. It's a great blueprint for how we can welcome more neighbors to be our new friends in town. So keep refining this document toward its worthy goals and bring it back to us. We can't wait to read the next version. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Very helpful, and I appreciate also, I know council members, we all received a more sort of thorough version of Patrick's comments by email this week. So I encourage everyone to read those as well. I know that the staff received Patrick's email comments also. Our next speaker is going to be Diana Newton, and after Diana, we'll hear from Lisa Bennett. Welcome, Diana. Welcome back. And
hi, thank you. Thank you.
You have approximately 3 minutes, if you please.
Yeah, thank you. I want to first appreciate the comprehensive nature of the comprehensive plan. It is laudable in terms of its breadth and addressing, very important strategic issues for the town of Carrboro. There is a dark side to the word comprehensive and the reality of this document, which is that it is, rather than just a grand and inspiring plan, I think it leans to the side of grandiose in that in 258 pages, there are over 40 strategies, over 40 goals, 100 strategies, and I was not willing to count the sub-bullets under all the strategies. Every one of them worthy. Every one of them worthy. My question is around the dark side. How are you going to get it done? This is where the plan comes up woefully short in terms of implementation specifics. I would suggest to Trish and the staff and the council that the implementation section needs major work, that draft metrics that say things like increase in number of is virtually meaningless, X percentage of budget, reduce cost burden from 17% to X%. I would strongly oppose adopting this plan unless every X and Y that is now a question mark is filled in, and that the dollar amounts that range from a single dollar sign to $3 signs in the implementation section give me no sense of thousands, millions, or billions. Why should we as citizens commit to a 20-year plan without knowing what the increases are going to be in cost reduction, improvement of affordable housing, whatever those goals are, and no cost virtually assigned whatsoever? So I caution the council with impunity to not rush to adopt the plan just because there's been a lot of work invested. There can be something called a sunk cost, which is you just drive forward because you've done it. More due diligence in the how rather than the what is needed. And to that end, I request that part of the plan includes development of a digital dashboard for transparency and accountability, so that in the implementation final version, any citizen can go and at the touch of a button see what kind of progress has been made and where the realization of the goals stands. Thank you. 3 minutes also, Dan.
Yes, very good. This is amazing. Thanks for your comments, Diana. And again, like as with the other speakers, I know that Trish and others are taking notes, and appreciate your focus, especially on that implementation section, Diana. I know that's something that we have talked with staff a little bit about in our previous discussions, and is clearly an important piece of the puzzle here in terms of getting the things done and that we want to get done. So
yeah, I would just say that, you know, a vision without sufficient implementation is a dream. So let's be more than just dreamers.
Appreciate it. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
We are going to move to our next speaker, who is Lisa Bennett, and then we will go on to Nathan Jorgensen. Lisa, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Nice to see you.
I'll be brief.
Yeah.
My toddler's screaming upstairs. I like Ed Larson. I wanted to speak about the page 145 comment about the meadow on Fidelity Street. Just say that I used to live on Fidelity Street for like 10 years and really appreciated the chance that open space gave for casual walking, dog walking. The area is so densely populated. It's really different from where I live now, which is over near the post office. And I've seen a huge difference in the temperatures in the summer. It's actually like horrible on Fidelity Street. And if you may have noticed, the Inara Court development has added to kind of the loss of canopy and shade. So I just feel that area is super important to keep green and not just like paved paths and such. Like park, I just always wonder what's going to happen with a park, how much pavement. There's already stormwater runoff. The Village Square townhouses, our trees are aging out. So I'm just concerned about canopy, continuing to add the canopy incentives for private property to add trees, but what can we do that's easy? You don't need to do anything to that to keep it nice. Just leave it the way it is. That would be my input. I enjoyed it for so many years, and it's has trees too, so it's an excellent place for people in that neighborhood. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Lisa. Appreciate you taking the time away from the toddler.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Good luck with bedtime. Thank you. We're going to move on to Nathan Jorgensen. And then I'll just say again, if there are other folks here, members of the public who wish to speak on the draft comprehensive plan and you're here in the audience, if you would use the raise hand feature in Zoom to let me know so I can ask the clerk to pull you over. Nathan, welcome. You have about 3 minutes. Glad to see you.
Hi, yes. Thank you for having me. I'm just also bringing my voice up about Fidelity Street. And so I don't have much additionally to say. One thing that I guess I have a question, but I'm not expecting an answer now. Maybe I can ask more at the Carrboro conversations that were mentioned earlier. But I read in the comprehensive plan on page 172 that there have been public comments kind of going both ways on that, the expansion of the cemetery versus a park. And I'd just like to learn more about the other side of how people feel about that. For this side of the neighborhood and, keeping an eye out for green spaces here in the side that is more dense and doesn't have very many of them. So thank you.
Great. Thanks very much for adding your voice to that. And I think as the draft plan tries to capture, there has been a variety of perspectives on that issue. And so we want to kind of honor that if we can in this particular stage of the planning. But thanks for calling that out. Thanks also for a shout out about Carrboro conversations coming up later this week. I hope that folks will take advantage of that opportunity. Thanks, Nathan. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands raised in the attendee room. I'll give it about 5 seconds here. All right. Trish, do you have anything else to share at this time, or do you want to open up for questions from council members?
We're ready to answer questions. We do have the comments files ready. We can pull them up if you want to go through them, or the things that were the comments that were included as attachments.
Right.
But we do have those tables as resources if they're helpful to walk through. But other than that, we're here for questions. Thank you.
Yeah, those might be helpful when we get to that point if council members have questions wanting to refer to specific items. But why don't we see where people want to go with that? Who would like to start us off, if anyone?
Hey, you know what? I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand. Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, and so again, I trying to figure out how all this is going to go because it's so much information, right? So we have comments from the public, we have all those comments from advisory boards and commissions, we have our staff comments. So I mean, I have a few comments myself, as well as I'm sure colleagues do, but I'm not sure like how to step forward because it's so much, right? So that's what I was thinking about, Mayor.
It is a lot. I think I will say to Trish and staff that I found it very helpful that you called out some specific items you did want feedback on, in addition to other thoughts that Barbara and other council members will have about other items in the draft. That helped me to kind of organize my approach to the document. So I do, and I assume others will have at some point comments about some of those specific items that staff has asked for guidance or direction on. And any other items that council members want to bring up tonight. It sounds like we will have opportunities to come back to this as well and to share other feedback with staff at at least one future meeting, if I understood Trish correctly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I think what we can do tonight is if council members have comments, especially about the items where staff requested guidance, I think that's important. And then, of course, if there's any other items that council members wanted to speak on, that would be helpful too. I think Trish I assume would like as much guidance as possible, but especially on the items that they called out in the agenda abstract.
So are we on those 6 or 7 items, Mayor and Trish, the ones in the red text within the document? I know that was one of them. And was there something else, Mayor or Trish? I know those. Thank you.
Yep. So I think those are part of what we need to be talking about. And let me just go back to my document here. I think those were the main ones, but I think the other 2 main things that Trish mentioned a minute ago were the 2 tables that staff provided in the agenda. One was the table of comments that were compiled all of the advisory board recommendations. And then there was a second table that compiles a number of staff comments from various departments in the town. And so I think if we have feedback on any of those items, that would be helpful as well.
I might just say one other thing was the metrics point that we had noted, some refining the metrics. We can and if there's other direction that you want to provide and to help address some of the comments that you've been hearing from the public, that's also important, whether it's on the question of intensity or clarification about implementation or,
Great,
all of those things. Mm-hmm.
So I see that Danny has raised his hand. Barbara, do you want me to jump to Danny now, or do you want to continue?
I guess, so there are those items in red text, and then I specifically remember advisory board comments, I think where it might have said question for the council, or something like that. I saw a few of those. And so I guess the time is what I'm concerned about, like us having adequate time, one, to hear from all of us. We probably all have comments, general. and then to be able to touch on, the items that our consulting team and town staff need to hear from us on. I think that's what I was thinking about, Mayor. Thanks.
So I'm going to make a prediction here. I think that several of us have some comments to make on some of these specific items that that staff has asked for guidance on. I expect that we're going to need an additional meeting time to go through some items as well, based on tonight's presentation and the extensive tables of advisory board and staff comments that we were provided with. I agree with Barbara that it's unlikely that we're going to get through all of that substance tonight. So just, Mr. Manager, kind of throwing that out there, I just highlight my expectation that we'll need some additional time to meet as a group on this topic now that we've held a public hearing, and can kind of come together with our own thoughts as well as what we heard from the public and be able to respond. But I know some of us certainly have comments to share tonight. And we can talk more about timeline maybe at the end once we get through what people have to share. Danny?
Thanks, Mayor. I'll lower my hand so that it doesn't grow vestigial. First and foremost, I want to echo a lot of the comments that I really shared the desire to get some benchmarks and accountability in this plan. But I also want to be mindful of some of the feedback we've received from TSCA throughout this process, that some of these benchmarks were relatively limited as a town in what we can really promise to hit. I think there's a lot of value in coming on the same page as a town and making sure that our goals are in order and that they reflect our values. But as a progressive community in a hostile state, we have quite a bit of needle threading that we need to do in terms of these documents and then the implementation with us as policymakers to make sure that this document really functions in all of the senses that it's supposed to. So I really want to, I hope that as council and as staff, we can continue to have conversations sort of internally and in conjunction with the Carrboro Connects process and the planning department to figure out the most appropriate way to add those accountability measures and benchmarks. I very much agree that we have too much considering, and I very much agree that there are several instances where some numbers, as far as density, for instance, in terms of its impact on transit and walkability, where considering numbers as goals would be very helpful. So that's, I think, unlikely somewhere that we're going to get tonight. But I do think that as a council, as we're looking at the next couple months of this, we need to stay in really close touch to figure out how we want to approach the concept of accountability and benchmarking within this plan. And then secondly, the other predominant strain of comments we have tonight, focusing on Westwood. And I wonder, Trish, this is really a question for you and maybe for Francie. On 147 and 172, is it appropriate to use these pages to have the town start to drill down on the process by which we might make this decision? We have to analyze the rate of funeral plot sales as they're happening. We need to make contact with the community members who make use of that funeral and the funeral homes who are using it regularly. We need to price alternative lands for town public cemeteries if that's going to be something we do to keep a programmed park. And I know that some of these discussions predate my time on the council, but I'm wondering whether either 147 or 172 would be a feasible place to commit to concrete steps in that process to try and get some clarity on Westwood.
Sorry, trying to find my mouse. Well, the implementation section on rec and parks, the first thing is to actually do a further study of park spaces for the town. I'm pretty sure I'm just going to go back there and double check it's in the first 5 years. I know action, so I think it is spelled out there to what would be some of the consideration of this space in the context of that larger question of where does the town need to provide additional recreation and park space consistent with all of the interests that we will be trying to meet in doing that. So, which will be location and facilities and so forth. So let me just double check. And Francie might be quicker than I am on answering this question.
I think the page you're looking for is 213 in the implementation section, and you're correct. It's strategy 2.1. strive for a park, playfield, or other green space within walking distance and physically accessible to all residents in Carrboro. And then the first action step under there is that to use the park access map to identify priority locations for new parks, playfields, or other green spaces.
I would also like to highlight on page 145 in the middle is a box that says sidebar feature criteria for parkland acquisition and capital improvements. We'd like feedback. There's 5, the dots are missing, but there's actually 5 different criteria there. And that would be very helpful to get feedback from the council, because that then helps guide those decisions. It's not just the map. The map is actually the 5th out of the 5 criteria.
Thanks for both of that clarification.
Very much appreciated. Just wanted to make sure that we shouldn't be laying out specifics for something that comes up in a couple of these different red text items, but absolutely loud and clear that 213 covers the broader process there. So thank you very much.
It's a trying to, and we do want to have everyone find their comfort level with that, of course. So I really appreciate the question.
I think just to quickly add on to what Danny mentioned there, Trish, and I know there are a couple mentions in the draft plan about the Recreation and Parks Master Plan that the town has and has had for many years. And I think it's been a while since it's been really updated in any significant way, but just wanted to, if maybe there's an opportunity to make clear in the draft plan that there is this master planning process that's been the town is engaged in terms of identifying park and recreation facility needs, and that, in other words, we have a process in place for identifying and park needs, and maybe that's, I don't know, I just want to sort of call that out as a possible way to be thinking about talking about planning for park facilities, right? That we have done that before. Is this a matter of going through the process of amending the Recreation and Parks Master Plan, or something else if we decide to go that direction? So I just wanted to throw that out there, that we're not sort of operating in a park planning vacuum, right? There's a Recreation and Parks Master Plan out there that ought to be at least kind of referenced and consulted as part of any discussion about future park facilities.
Thank you for that, Mayor. And we have followed the procedural requirements, I guess and information requirements for this this component of the comprehensive plan to serve in that capacity. And of course, then have follow-up steps for implementation. So further clarification of this, as we've sort of mentioned in the implementation section. But for the purposes of seeking, funding for park facilities, we have framed this chapter to satisfy that update, the update of our master parks, master plan for recreation and parks.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Susan Romain, you're up next.
Thank you, Mayor. And Danny, I appreciate that question. There's been a lot of community members who have contacted us, have spoken, emailed about the Westwood Cemetery, and I appreciate you asking that question and Trish bringing clarification to that. I had just a few things I was also hoping to get a little bit of clarification in terms of what's currently in the plan. And so I believe it's 3 items, Trish. And the first is our developers are consistently going for the payment in lieu as opposed to the affordable housing, which is sort of raising this question, are we not asking enough for the payment in lieu? And that's been just from some of the conversations I've been a part of. I have heard a lot of people talking about this as sort of like maybe a simple way to get affordable housing built in a more timely way. But I noticed this was not part of the, one of the priorities selected in the implementation under affordable housing. And I was just curious to get your thoughts on why that was.
Do you mean to change the payment in lieu is not a priority, or to try not to have it not be used? Which part of that?
To ask for a higher payment in lieu.
Okay.
So that there was more of an incentive for the developer to build the housing.
I'm not sure. I can ask Scott if he has some thought about this. I don't know if, it is it's intended to be updated. Well, there's a long history to the way we got the figure we have. We did adjust it several times before we arrived at the current figure. But Scott, could you address this question? You're muted, by the way.
Councilwoman, why don't we go on to your other comments and I can look through. We've gone back and forth on the wording on this. It has come up in meetings, and I have to look up the current wording in here because there's a balancing component that we've worked with staff on. So let me get back to you on that.
I appreciate that. I'm really just bringing it up because I know it has, I wanted to sort of lift it up because I have heard quite a few community members say, why don't we just, raise the payment in lieu? So I wanted to just highlight that. Second is under transportation and mobility. One of the priorities is to investigate lowering residential parking requirements to reduce impervious surfaces and enhance affordable housing. And I wasn't sure why that was just residential. Do we want to be lowering, even eliminating the commercial parking requirements as well? I wasn't sure why we were focusing just on residential here.
Well, that particular recommendation or strategy is linked to, I guess, Patrick's comment is there is some, there is research and some reports even locally about the connection with affordability of housing. So I think that's why it's linked to residential.
I didn't see any reference to it in, under economic sustainability but anyway, I just wanted to lift that up as well as lowering, hopefully, maybe even eliminating the requirement for commercial parking.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think as part of the direction that we have, I'll say this sort of systems approach we have in the plan to connect climate action and the racial equity lens, and looking at many things when we're looking at the ordinance. Looking at parking will be part of when we look at ordinance changes regarding density or land use or whatever. Parking will be part of that. But I hear you. So
okay. And then my third comment is, and there's been a little bit of a we have heard there's been a little bit of a common theme in this. In terms of looking at ways that we can have more density. And so here I'm going to go to the land use section. And there is talk about increasing amount of land available for commercial mixed use development. But I also wanted to sort of pick up on what Patrick McDonough had said earlier this evening about looking for ways that we can rezone single family for multi-unit housing. And Patrick was indicating, I'm not sure if his numbers were correct. I imagine they're close to, if not correct, but it was 1.5%, I believe, of our acreage right now has been rezoned so that there could be this additional multi-unit housing built, which seems like, given our housing crisis, it's not enough. And so Patrick was urging us to encourage staff to go back to looking at 300, 400 acres of land where we could rezone from single family to multi-unit. I don't know if, I don't mean to be throwing out a specific number, but I will say that maybe my biggest concern about where we're heading over the next 20 years is not only do we need to build more affordable housing, we just need to build more housing, period. And I worry that if we don't start this process of building more multi-unit housing, that 20 or 30 years from now, we are becoming a town of, professors and physicians, and there's no more teachers and social workers and automobile mechanics and bartenders able to live here. So that's why if I had, one takeaway in terms of my comments, it would be to really look more closely at ways that we can take some of our land and, you know, especially over on my side of town, northern part of the town, can we rezone where currently just for single family and be building more multifamily units to really get at in a bigger way the building of more housing so that we can really more fully address our housing crisis. And that's it from me.
Thank you for that, Susan. I appreciate you coming to the table with those comments. Very important. Danny and then Barbara.
Picking up just where Susan left off, sort of my other highest priority point of discussion for the evening, and I'm rifling through the tabs trying to find which page this was on, and I haven't yet, so forgive me. But we've been asked to consider the 2 zoning strategies, either A or B, that might, Susan, help us move forward there. I believe A in that section asks us to consider sort of a holistic zoning approach that really focuses on high density transit corridors, and B really asks for overlay zoning that encourages a by right or as right design. And I would just like to cut straight to the point. I vastly prefer option A there. I don't think option B is really a fit for town here. And I think that approach, Susan, closes the gap, I think, on a lot of what you're talking about and moves us forward, you know, as we talk about some of those big corridors that reach out into the north part of town.
Thanks, Danny. And yeah, since staff did ask for guidance on that particular point, this is the red text found on that Danny's referring to is the part on page 162, strategy 2.2. I'll just say that I completely agree that option A is preferable. Barbara, you're next, and then we'll go to Sammy.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to Susan and Danny, right down my street. I'm on A as well. So I just have some general comments. You know, spent a lot of time reading public comments. I missed some today, but a lot of them resonated with what I was thinking about the plan. You know, as you know, community members talked about the boldness, you know, of our plan or lack of. I think I heard Ms. Newton talk about grandiose, you know, when she described, you know, our plan. And so it sets me to thinking about if we're setting ourselves up to really achieve the goals, you know, and also, you know, the values, right? Are our values being addressed through this plan? So, and if we keep doing, you know, the same thing, you know, we're going to get the same result. And this plan is just like this really major opportunity to move us into the future in an equitable and sustainable way. And we have to take advantage of this opportunity and not hold back on what we know our community needs and what our community members are asking for. You know, I also think about sometimes what happens to our town, to our community, if we continue on the same path. You know, what happens to our town? What will our town become? I think Mayor Pro Tem Romaine, you know, just kind of said that, you know, sort of in her comments. Also, you know, one of our community members asked for definitions. You know, it's like, what does walkability mean? You know, does it mean the same thing to Mary that it does to Joe? Does it depend on where you live in town? You know, what are we saying when we talk about walkability? How are we defining walkability? How are we defining the character of the town? When we talk about the character of our community, what does that mean? Is that obvious in the plan? You know, getting some definitions around, you know, some of the language that we're using, because, you know, the language clarity is key. We may look at it and just understand right away, you know, staff may be the same, you know, of course, staff, you're putting it out there, right? And a consultant. But if the public can't look at the document and understand, and it's ambiguous and they're just kind of like, oh, I think they meant this. I don't know, they might have meant this. I mean, the clarity is just, it is so key as we push information out to the public as it relates to our comprehensive plan. Also, somebody said in single family zoning, add accessory dwelling unit regulations, in parking minimums and free parking. This is our community like speaking to us, around this document. They also talked about choke points, choke points around certain issues that don't serve all of our residents. That's important. Too many considers in the plan, like we'll consider this or we'll consider that. Well, what does that mean? Are we going to do it or are we not going to do it? And I also want to lift up, and I feel like it was an anonymous email. It doesn't really matter. There was an email about resentment around centering BIPOC folks as a politically favored group. And, that was a little jab, for me, as I'm Black, right? So I'm part of the BIPOC group. But I thought about it again in that moment. And I said, this could also be an educational opportunity, for our community members. Have we put enough historical context there? Have we put out information, hey, we're centering BIPOC folks. Well, why are you centering BIPOC folks? Have we delved deep enough, with that the public understands why the pillars are there? Why are we using these pillars? Why are we centering BIPOC folks everywhere? Why is that even important? So I kind of switched gears and just said, it could be, an educational piece or a learning opportunity. Also read about the public hearing phase, said it needed some outward facing education, right? And this just goes back to community understanding. I mean, it ain't about us. We're doing the work, but it's about the community that we serve. And I think we all know that, but they have to know and understand, what we're doing, and also why we're doing it. Westwood Cemetery. I mean, that's a thing. The expansion is a thing. We've had consultant work around that. That property was bought for that purpose. It's been used for that purpose. But certainly we want to address the desire for the use of the backside of the Westwood Cemetery. I'm not sure, which direction the council wants to go with this. I feel like that is another discussion, but I absolutely feel that we need to be careful with the language and that goes into the plan. What do we want that to read? I mean, I would want it to read that, of course, we hear the public, but then too, you have the expansion piece. And so that's still a conversation in motion. I also wanted to lift up the flawed infill policy that came from one of our community members, Mr. Ellington. I think we see it, all over town. Is it flawed or not? Is it doing what it's supposed to be doing? I mean, our community is, is changing before our very eyes. It really is. I have a couple of more things. So I want to go back to Trish. I know she talked about the One Orange Equity Framework and the implementation plan or something along those lines. And certainly we need a racial equity evaluation, of this plan. And certainly when I think about that, subject matter expert, I think about Anita Jones McNair. I mean, I know that there are other staff members engaged, but certainly she is at the very heart of the work. And I also feel like there's probably not a lot of BIPOC weigh-in outside of our task force. I think our BIPOC task force members are carrying the weight, from the rest of the community. So I think that makes the racial equity evaluation just really important, an important part, as we hopefully move towards approval of the plan. Again, the boldness is important. The willingness to step out, from where we've been. We see, we know where we've come from. We see where we are, and we all have certain things that we want to see in our community. We know we have an affordability issue in our community. We know we need, more affordable housing, more missing middle housing. We have transit goals we're trying to reach, climate change, environmental justice goals we're trying to reach. And it's just a lot. But at this point, it's on us. It's on all of us. And it has to be very public facing. The accountability has to be there, the transparency. And we're just at a jump off point, guys. I mean, that's how I feel. I feel like we're at a jump off point with this plan. And if we're not going to move now, then I ask when. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Barbara. Sammy?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, appreciate all the comments from both colleagues on the council, but also from the community, and just the process generally. It's rather daunting to try to. I'm glad we're going to have more time to grapple with how to incorporate so many of these ideas further, because we're clearly not there yet. One thing I just want to start by commenting is on the folks' expression on page 162, this question that staff is putting to us on whether to pursue one or both projects listed there. One is the overlay, the other is by right. I was surprised to hear that most of my colleagues on the council would rather by right. The reason I'm surprised is an overlay, from my understanding, or maybe I misunderstood, Danny. I'm glad to hear your clarification. But I would rather go down and include both, because my understanding of an overlay is we're basically signaling to developers that we're interested in this kind of development in this area, but these are the certain kinds of things you would have to meet, including affordability, for you to have that applied to your piece of property. And I think it would take us a long ways to address a lot of what Patrick McDonough is pointing out in terms of needing to really be serious about the amount of acreage that we need. In that map that shows the future land use of our town, it's very piecemeal. What an overlay district would do is really like, broad stroke. This is how we see mixed use, higher density development in a large chunk of town, as opposed to this piecemeal, this property versus this property, which brings me to another point that we received an email from Rob Lavelle, this huge challenge that we have of how to make new developments have soul. In other words, not be these large tracts of land that the couple of developers that can afford to build on those do this like master plan, and it's all soulless. It will never emulate or compare to what the core of our downtown is, a place that really was iterative in its process of development. And I think that an overlay district could help achieve that kind of goal of, as he put it, granularity and soul. So I really want us to be thinking about how to achieve that. And I think, for lack of any better tools, I think if I understand it correctly, an overlay district is the tool. But I look forward to hearing from staff in terms of that question, how do we achieve some of those goals, affordability being one, and two, the granularity and soulness of place. Another thing was in the affordable housing section, I noticed that there's some overlays, and there's also an attempt to try to reference that there's things that overlay, like some projects that saddle both, like, for example, affordable housing and climate change. And in this example specifically, I think it very much behooves us to include on page 46 under strategy 4.2 and strategy 4.1, and a very clear reference to the project of leveraging and augmenting the weatherization assistance program so that weatherizing can happen with a goal of weatherizing all low-income homes. And it shouldn't be siloed solely in climate. My concern is that the Affordable Housing Task Force, for example, will be looking at this document, and lost through the cracks is this huge opportunity to achieve both goals. And if anything, it's those items and projects that saddle both goals that we have as a council that we should really be highlighting and not making likely to be lost from sight. On page 4, under economic development plan goals, it's been a longstanding goal of the Board of Aldermen and now the council to maximize a locally owned economy, as if that could be included as one of the goals. There's so many reasons for a locally owned economy. I totally agree with so much of what Patrick included in terms of questions of how to augment missing middle and duplex, triplex over single family homes. And, there have been times where the single family homes is the only thing that's allowed in some zonings. I wouldn't be averse to flipping that on its head so that we're allowing for these higher density, lower priced units to be developed instead of the higher buck for the developer, bigger, properties that are displacing so much of our historical stock, but certainly displaces our ability to exist in our town affordably. There's some items in here that there's some tension around, like the Westwood Cemetery. I think we need to be very clear about what the goals are. I think this point between like the analysis that originally showed that part of town lacking parks, and then comparing that to the 10-mile walkability metric, I think there's a way to make a hybrid way of assessing whether using both of those ways of assessing the need there, because I totally agree with the analysis that that includes like some of these parks that we are considering as parks aren't really parks. Like the Century Center it does not really fit that kind of category, and then there are other parks that aren't really neighborhood. They serve the town, like the town commons, and then schools. Schools have all their problems in terms of when they're accessible. So I think that maybe the decision of what to do there is not what we need to do in this comprehensive plan, but rather the guidelines for how to get there in terms of what to do at the cemetery. And then likewise, with the greenways, I hate to be the one that needs to grapple this, but it's a big undercurrent that we get a signal from both sides of our community about how people feel about it. And we've been promising them for more than 10 years that we would do that job and make a decision. And we have our bike plan and now the comprehensive plan. And because we haven't done that work, these things are in limbo. So the next best thing to not be able to not define them in any of those documents, like we did with the bike plan, is make the point that this hasn't been resolved. And it is, we are intending, and we even passed a resolution that said within a year we would deal with this issue. And that was more than a year ago. We need to follow through with that resolution so that we don't find ourselves continually in this limbo and it being just the status quo that remains. And that is a decision in itself. So we need to make a decision overtly, not by inaction. On page 52, I just want to clarify there, because it also came up in some of the recommendations that the advisory boards made. There's a little confusion in what that language should say. We have defined a climate action goal for a town with the request that town staff come to us with a 10-year budget plan broken down annually. And I think that the intention on page 52 as one of the metrics is that we, at a minimum, allocate 20% of the budget required to meet the town's climate action goals is funded by the town over the next 10 years. That just being a minimum, because we do take the climate emergency seriously, and like with so many other projects, we often require and depend on our support from state and federal agencies, which typically provide the 80%, and we put down the 20%. And I think that would be a nice, elegant metric for how to speak to that in that on that page, and to answer staff's question in that regard. Those are so far my questions. I do have remaining questions in terms of how we're going to go about answering the many other X and Y's that we're supposed to fill in terms of metrics. I'm very glad we will have more time. I plan to, I'm not sure when I'll be able to do this, but I plan to compile a lot of the more detailed things that I'm pulling from as I read the document, and from what I'm hearing from feedback from the public and emails, and share that with the council before our next meeting, so those things could be shared in advance, and you guys have the benefit, and we can save some time in terms of the amount of comments that might be required otherwise. Thank you.
Thanks, Sammy. Next up is Randy.
Okay.
And Randy, we ask our speakers to keep it to 3 minutes. I'm kidding.
Yeah, right. Actually, a lot of what I was thinking has been said. I just want to pull up a couple of points. And I guess this, Scott, are you still on? Scott here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So, Scott, going back to last May, I want to say I had asked a question that I guess one of the speakers raised tonight, and that was about getting the information about engagement in the comprehensive plan to neighborhoods and homeowners associations, and was that actually in fact pursued?
I'm going to turn that over to Trish and Ben.
Well, we did mail everybody in the community postcards, and we used our next door connections. We do not have updated homeowner association lists, points of contact for all of neighborhoods in town. So, we used a number of other strategies to.
Right. I mean, there was an. I'm sorry. Do you want me to answer some more? I think that we worked closely with your communications team through a variety of social media. We did the pop-ups. We have gotten a lot of comments in from Northern Study Area and others. Would we have liked to have done more? Absolutely, not just that area, but all throughout the town. And so we try to use the tools that could get to as many people that are not currently on boards and try to reach as many people as possible, but we'd always like to do more.
Okay. And I raised that question because, I found that there were large pockets of people who had no idea about this. And many people didn't even know about the 203 project, actually. And so I wonder, I don't want us to be in a position, okay? I want to buffer ourselves from being in a position where this is a 20-year plan, and many of the folks that I've known that who are less engaged right now, they have young children. They're going to be maybe middle-aged, maybe a little older than middle-aged, so this is their lifetime here in Carrboro, and I want to be sure that they don't feel where did this come from? And I don't know going forward if there's more that we can do before we close commentary, or how best we can make sure that we've done everything that we can do, which means maybe going another step or two and saying, hey, did you know that this is in the final stages? Let's make sure you know that it exists. And then my next point gets to, and I really, Barbara, you did a fabulous job of distilling so much information that's been coming at us. And I think that one of the things that was, I think Diane Newton mentioned it about having some, a digital dashboard. I really think how the documentation is done and how it's rolled out is going to be really important. I know, and Trish, I want your help on this, because the numbers, when I saw, numbers in red, it didn't match my copy. I downloaded 2 or 3 different copies. It didn't match the page numbers I had. So if I'm having that kind of problem, what are folks in community having? And I don't know why that happened. I mean, I can get up with you later on that. But I knew what I was looking for, and so that's important. A couple of other things. Barbara mentioned, and I like the way she said it, outward-facing education. As an educator, I feel like education is what makes people feel like they can be part of the conversation for real. So I would really like to pull that out. When Barbara talked about the educational opportunity, or even, responding to how she was feeling about an email, getting it in context, I think making sure that we do that and underscore, especially when we're talking about race equity and climate. For some people, not understanding what's the context of why race equity is so important to our community. What is the urgency about climate? Why are these the two overarching filters and pillars, I should say, for which we're constructing this voluminous plan? And then I really appreciated Sammy pulling out the locally owned. We spent a very long time working on our local living economy, and that should be front and center of our economic development plan. Recirculating the dollars locally is at the core of our economic development. I appreciate what Danny and Susan and Sammy said about Westwood. I appreciate what Barbara said in terms of, well, how are we going to look at this and hear the public and have a conversation. And I feel like there is a very strong statement in the Recreation and Parks section that causes us to rethink that space and how best that space is part of the larger community of folks who live around it and their needs. Okay, I think the last thing that I wanted to add, the question about the accessory dwellings. No, let me back up. The overlay, it's in the LUO at 2.2, and by right, I think there's enough there that we should have more conversation rather than just pick and choose A or B. This is not a menu. This affects people's lives. It also, how are we looking at possibilities? And are we limiting ourselves to how this looks right now instead of what it could be in the future? So that's one thing that I'd like us to be thoughtful of. And the second was of course, with the accessory dwellings, I think that's something that we've been working towards for years. So with that said, the only other question that I would have is, if there is a way to get a better sense of how well we have met community engagement. I want to be very certain this is huge, and I don't want to make assumptions that just because folks didn't respond to the card, that we're not we're saying, well, we're just moving forward. I want to be very thoughtful of that, and I'd rather put out the word and say, look, here's some materials. This is what public has weighed in on. What do you think? And be sure that no one feels that they are not aware or uninvolved. So thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Okay. I do have a few comments to share as well, and then we can circle back around to council members who have additional things to share. First, Trish, just going through the list of red text items that you called out for us in the agenda abstract. I think you've heard, I think I mentioned, I talked a little bit about the Westwood Cemetery question, the first one on your list. I think you've probably heard enough about that maybe. But I mean, I appreciate that, and as I've tried to share with people who have asked me about that particular topic, that what we've tried to do in the draft plan is to reflect reflect the current state of the community's conversation on that specific topic, and suggest that there's a way forward to make a decision there, but that the comprehensive plan itself is not going to be the place to make that decision. And so that's what I also mentioned earlier tonight, that there might be an opportunity to, for example, to reference the recreation parks and master plan that we have and existing processes for thinking about future park locations. The second item around architectural standards, the planning board apparently made a comment, although I could not find that comment, so I'm not sure where it was when I was looking through the compiled version. Maybe it was in a fuller set of comments or maybe in a previous round of comments, but I guess I wanted to understand a little bit more about what the planning board is recommending. But in any case, I haven't heard others weigh in on this question, but I personally am fine with the planning board's recommendation on that topic. On item number 3, which is this issue around the land use strategy 2.2 that we've heard, I think now some varying opinions about which of those two tools is preferable. You know, maybe it would be helpful now that I've heard, especially when Sammy was talking about kind of this clarity about what each of those two tools is, right? It might be helpful if we could just get some comments from you, Trish, about maybe I'm misunderstanding what's being described in those two paragraphs. Because when I approached it, what I thought I was seeing was in option number 1 or option A, or however they're designated, a sort of approach that, generally speaking, identifies areas of the town that are along transit corridors and that are appropriate for example, more dense multifamily transit-oriented, et cetera, development. That those areas of town in general would be essentially upzoned, or whatever the correct word is for those areas, to make them more ripe for redevelopment opportunities. And that option B, which talks specifically about an overlay district, seemed to be a much more specific thing that would be applied to a specific area to make certain by right development acceptable or allowed. I guess the reason that I was thinking that option A seemed preferable to me, I'd be interested in hearing, you know, I think Danny had mentioned that option earlier too, is that I was understanding option A to be kind of a general, essentially, rezoning of these transit corridor, of areas along these transit corridors. And to me, that's what was appealing about it. That, you know, that we have existing transit corridors that are possibly going to be even more concentrated in terms of their transit service, especially if we allow for more opportunities to add residential or mixed use development on those corridors. So maybe Trish, could you just do you understand that what I'm maybe misunderstanding? Can you share what you're
I hear what you're saying. I'm going to say something, and then I'm going to ask Scott or Francie to weigh in as well. I mean, I see strategy 2.2 as following from strategy 2.1. And so there's a small area plan, you know, development piece for high priority and density areas that's included there. And I think that will inform somewhat strategy 2.2 to me. And so I understand why we put the red text in here, but I'm not sure, you know, either approach is precluded by what we don't yet know what may come out of. There has to be some more digging in on some details, basically, to be able to define the parameters that we would use for either of these tools. And so I would say that you could certainly choose to have only one of them in here, although at the end of the day we may find ourselves wanting another tool. So if I could maybe ask Scott to.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It comes back to what Sammy said in his beginning of his comments, which was just keep both tools. They're not mutually exclusive, right? As long as they are still getting us to the outcome that we want.
I would just agree with both of you on that. The reason why the future land use map is not showing hundreds of acres of changing uses, those are largely built up areas. And you're talking about people's homes and historic buildings, et cetera. So the plan right now provides the policy tools, but is suggesting a more fine-grained analysis of actually rezoning. A land use map is not a zoning map. You haven't typically had a land use map in Carrboro. So this is a new tool, but it does need to be consistent in North Carolina. So that is why this is laying out a process and implementation plan for carefully considering zoning increases. And so that's why, like, the criteria for parks and looking at transit and other measures in order to have a goal of the town for additional growth of both residential and commercial is all in the plan now. And all the tools are in the plan, but it takes a lot more work to make that happen in a way that's going to take into consideration transportation, bike paths, greenways that we talked about. There are all of these issues that need to be taken into consideration before changing the land use of an existing use of property owners, right? I agree with Trish on this particular point that A is a more direct approach. Some cities have done B because they didn't want to change the zoning. So they put an overlay on top of it, and then each property owner application and then either goes under existing zoning or these increased, presumably higher density, higher FAR, lower parking standards if you meet certain conditions. I think having them both in the plan would be helpful because it depends the area of Carrboro, whether one tool works better than another, right? If it's a more of in an undeveloped area where there aren't existing homes, et cetera, you might pick one tool. In an area where there's a context of small homes and small lots and ADUs, you might want to go with a different tool.
Right. Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you. I guess what a sort of scenario or just idea that keeps coming to mind for me, and as I often talk to folks about kind of what they're seeing change in our neighborhoods today, right? Especially in some older neighborhoods in the core of in the urban core, is there are some very specific examples we all know them. Think about sort of old Carrboro, for example, where an older home has been taken down and replaced with another single family home, but typically much larger and some might say out of character from the rest of the neighborhood. But in any case, typically a much larger home replacing a more modest home in an older neighborhood. And the way that I think about things like that is that that's an outcome that is encouraged in some way or incentivized by the zoning of that neighborhood, right? In other words, certain outcomes are easier to achieve given the zoning of that property. And typically in a single family neighborhood, that means that those neighborhoods are typically going to look the way they look because it's easier in those neighborhoods to build a single family home on a single piece of property. And there may be other land uses permissible there, but they're just not as easy to achieve. And so we see outcomes like the scenarios that I mentioned, because that's what our zoning ordinance makes easy relative to other outcomes. And so I guess when I'm approaching this question about tools available to make more things possible in areas of town, especially that are on transit corridors, I want to make sure we have tools that will help us get past that, what I see as an obstacle, which is zoning that incentivizes a certain outcome at the expense typically of other, perhaps more desirable outcomes. I'm not sure if that's helpful in terms of my perspective on that issue, but it's how I typically kind of have it in my head. So, I mean, I think, yeah, I'm open to having both of these tools available to us. But again, at the end of the day, my interest, I think, is in reflecting back that we have opportunities in large areas of this town to do things a little smarter, use our land a little better, make things more walkable and transit accessible, where today it's easier to not do that, given our current zoning ordinance. So let me, getting a little long-winded here, so I'm going to go to the next item on your list, which is about accessory dwelling units on page 162. I don't have, my note to myself here is that I don't have strong feelings about that issue. So I'll move on to the next one. The next one, on page 166, let me just skip down to there real quick. I guess I just wondered why we wouldn't tighten up the language there and simply say update parking requirements to reduce minimum requirements for affordable housing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the rest of that sentence. I don't know why we need to consider adjustments, et cetera. I mean, I think you can be a little more direct about our intentions there. It's to update our parking requirements to reduce the requirements for, to reduce the minimums. And I think that's true both there and in other places where parking requirements are mentioned, as you've heard from other folks. And then finally, this section on page 167 on architectural and historic preservation. I think maybe it would be helpful just to be distinguishing between kind of neighborhood protection districts in general and historic preservation in particular. I guess I want to tease out what is the value that we're trying to respond to here. A concern that I have is that I think what we've seen in some communities is that neighborhood preservation districts and similar kinds of tools tend to end up being used as a way to limit the potential for redevelopment in areas where they probably are more appropriate for redevelopment. But it sort of kind of freezes things, or suspends things in amber. And I'm very wary of those tools for that reason. So I'm not totally sure how to address that red text, but I think I agree with the concern expressed there regarding what it, if we're limiting what people can do in terms of, for example, adding accessory dwellings or doing other kinds of things, then we're not really achieving what we said our goal is, which is to provide more and different kinds of housing opportunities throughout the community. The more neighborhood preservation you have, the less opportunity there is to do that.
I don't think neighborhood preservation districts in and of themselves prevent accessory dwelling units. I mean, we do only have 2 in town.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily referring to ours that are existing NPDs. I'm referring to ones that I've seen put in place in other areas, including the town right next door to ours.
Yeah. So I think, that could be made more clear. The values you've described as things you would not want them to do.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, and just a few other quick comments. I know that I took longer to go through that red text list than I meant to. First, just wanted to clarify the table you provided, which compiles the advisory board comments. There's this column called proposed change or response. And my read of that is that those are the staff and consultant responses to each of those recommendations. And that in some cases you're asking for council or indicating that council probably needs to weigh in. So I found that helpful, but I just want to confirm that that's what's going on, that you have that column is a response by the staff and the consultants to the advisory board recommendation. Is that right?
That's correct. Sometimes it's a rewording and other times it's a request for you to
Okay, so we're going to just want to flag that for everybody else too, but as you're going through some of these other items that maybe we don't have time to get to tonight, that you also be sure to go through that compilation of the advisory board comments and find the ones you can go through. There's several where staff has inserted the comment, something like, for council decision or something, I don't remember what it was, but be sure to have responses prepared for those things if you wish to. I have thoughts of them, but I'm not sure if it's useful, Trish, for me to be going through them item by item right now, given the time. Finally, I just want to really appreciate the careful review that staff did from several departments: planning, public works, housing, I think rec and parks, very detailed review of the draft. Those are provided in that other attachment, I think attachment E. They all seemed like, I mean, on the whole, seemed like really useful edits and revisions. So I didn't have, nothing kind of stuck out for me, you know, as I went through it. I appreciate everyone's comments about accessibility and readability. I know that that's a goal for the consultants as well as we move on down the road toward the final version of the document. So, you know, just sort of, I'm not going to go through all the tools I know that you all know about for making documents readable and accessible. And then finally, I know that Barbara's hand is raised for some additional comments or questions, but I'm going to make sure before we get to the end of this agenda item that we do talk a little bit more about timeline / next steps. Okay, Barbara.
Thank you, Mayor. And so all I really wanted to do, well, I think I had 3 things. Mayor, I think I was thinking like you as far as option A or B, but certainly, you know, as many tools as possible, right? You know, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think it was understanding it the way you were. So I do want to kind of put that out there and not, you know, box off around A or B. I mean, it was just the way that I understood it when I read it. And also wanted to thank our town staff and the consultants, our task force, community, and advisory boards. I mean, this is a lot of work under some horrendous circumstances, and I don't want to, you know, close this meeting, you know, without saying that, but we're not quite there yet. And so, you know, we just need to spend just a little more time, you know, digesting and providing a little bit more input, but certainly the amount of work that's gone into this during a global pandemic. I mean, y'all did it. I mean, you know, and we're still doing it, and we're almost at the finish line. You know, we just have a little bit more work to do. So I wanted to ask this last question, and maybe it's for you, Mayor. I thought I might have heard you say that, but are we the discussion around Westwood Cemetery expansion? Did we just want to pull that? Are we pulling that out, or are we leaving it in? I mean, we know it's
yeah.
I guess that's what I was trying to understand, and that's it for me. Thanks.
I guess what I was saying in my comments about that particular issue is that I appreciate that staff and the consultants have just indicated in the plan, in the draft, that this is an ongoing conversation about a topic with a variety of perspectives from the community.
Okay.
And I personally view, but I'm one member of the council, my personal view is that the comprehensive plan is not the place to solve that particular choice, right? That particular, to make that particular decision. I mean, I think there are ways certainly, and I say that sort of independent of whether I would personally prefer one outcome or another. I mean, I think both, you know, I think all of the interests that have been expressed are really important and valuable to us figuring out what the right decision is. I'm just not sure that the comp plan is the place to do it.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so I absolutely agree with you. And you know, and looking on page 145, we definitely want to keep the notes in the comp plan, you know, because you know there's high interest there, you know, from the neighborhood, as well as folks, you know, who, you know, want to see it stay the way it is. But this is on page 145, where it says there have been calls for converting the green space adjoining Westwood Cemetery into a park. The green space is Westwood Cemetery. It's just not, you know, been expanded out yet. And so when I read that, I'm thinking this is separate from this, when really all of it is Westwood Cemetery. So I don't know what colleagues feel about that, but that would be the only thing that I would change. And just keeping in mind that folks are interested, you know, in the park, you know, in creating some type of park, you know, there. But just that it's not just a random green space. That is actually Westwood Cemetery, that hasn't been expanded into yet. So I didn't know what my colleagues felt about that. When I read it, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, Barbara, I think that's a really helpful clarification personally. I think, and maybe even just tweaking the language to indicate that it is the undeveloped portion of Westwood Cemetery that we're talking about. Others may have a view on that though. Thanks, Barbara. Danny.
So with that in mind, I've been tracking our comments on the red language here, and with more thanks to the staff for their incredible work in preparing this resolution with our feedback. To receive this feedback, I would like to move that we accept this with the following points of feedback. So this is, I believe I have made notes that reflect, I don't mean for these to be objectionable. So page number one, page 161, adopt the planning board's recommendation and end sentence a comprehensive plan. Number two, no maximum space necessary on ADUs. Number three, page 166, section C, expand the consideration for eliminating parking minimums to all building, not just building that prioritizes affordable housing. So consider reducing parking minimums across town. Page 167, clarify the intent and role of NPDs versus historic preservation as tools. And I believe that that's 4 notes for 4 blanks.
Thank you for that, Danny. So Danny has moved the resolution with that commentary gleaned from our conversation. Is there either a second or a more conversation to be had here? Sammy?
Yeah, I appreciate the intention there to move this along. I'm just also thinking that we are talking about needing to provide a lot more feedback, and that this resolution would be we would include a lot of what we are going to digest from our next meeting, and that we could include those things that Danny you've enumerated, but that there's a lot more that we want to include in that.
Okay, so I think what I'm taking from what you're saying, Sammy, is that we don't want those comments included in this resolution to be exclusive of additional comments we will have at a future meeting.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you, Sam.
Trish, does that make sense to you when I just said?
I understand what you just said. So,
okay,
but
maybe I should phrase my question a little differently. Do you have any issue? Is there any concern here? I think we did talk about needing to have a further conversation about timeline and next steps here, and maybe that's where this is taking us. But I know that staff has identified a couple of future dates during which we might consider kind of final nod of approval. Sounds like there might be need for some time before that potential April meeting, for us to come back again one more time to offer additional comments on this kind of final draft.
Yes, Mayor.
So Trish, what are your thoughts about that?
I think we would prefer to have one resolution or list of comments rather than 2.
I see.
If that's possible, just so that they're all together. And and yes, I'd heard the interest in y'all meeting again to review what you've heard and compile that list of comments, which has been informed certainly by your questions and discussion tonight. So to some degree, not entirely. So I think that
as a procedurally to trying to think about
continue the meeting.
Continue the meeting.
Yeah. So we don't move this resolution, this attachment. I mean, because it would be. Is that what you guys were thinking?
The other thing is we don't have to continue it. We can just resolve this agenda item without approving a resolution.
Right.
And that we are going to come together at a meeting in the next several weeks to continue this discussion amongst ourselves about the comments that we're going to share with staff.
And I would ask that Danny's the bullets that he mentioned, that we get a copy of that from staff, so that as we're reviewing the material, we can look at what was recommended.
I thought we might, in a draft resolution for that next discussion, just include those as the first 4 items.
Yeah, that would
work for starters. So
I'll email those informally right now, just so that we have them.
Scott?
Yeah, what would be extremely helpful, Mayor, you made the suggestion of attachment D being very important. If it's possible for the council members to refer to D and E before that meeting, And then it's almost like a consent agenda. You could pull off items you want to discuss, but Ben in particular put a lot of time putting those tables together, and it's very organized. It would be, I think it's going to cover most of the issues you have somewhere in those two documents. You may have some additional ones too, but that would be very helpful to
I totally
possible
agree.
to get that back before the next meeting.
I agree with that very much, Scott. Thank you. I mean, I think I'm thinking about two issues here. One is the timing of this next discussion. We need to figure that out, and I can work with the manager and staff to figure out when it makes sense to have that on an agenda. Second, in preparation for that discussion, we will have this kind of updated resolution draft that Trish mentioned, including some of these points been offered already, as well as a reminder to council members that in preparation for that meeting, we need to be ready to discuss each of the elements that we've been talking about, including the red text that staff has called out in the agenda abstract for tonight's item, the two tables that it turns out Ben was responsible for providing, which are amazing. Thank you, Ben. And any other items that I'm not remembering to mention here that are included in staff's memo where they've clearly asked us to provide guidance. So I think that's something I'll work on with the manager when we talk about when that next discussion is going to occur. But I think we're going to need to make sure to flag that for everyone, that in preparation for that discussion, we're going to have everyone's ready to go, everyone's notes ready to go, so that we can provide a final resolution to the staff about what our guidance is.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Manager, how are you feeling at this moment?
I think we got it. Lots of notes to follow up on. I do want to ask the attorney, or either you all, the public hearing, you haven't closed it officially.
Right.
What to do with that is a question.
My intention was to close the public hearing and to go ahead and just continue with the agenda without adopting a resolution. And we can put a new agenda item together for whenever we decide that next topic that discussion will be. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Great. And just for members of the public who are listening, this does not foreclose any opportunity for you all to continue to share your input with us, send us emails, talk to us on the street when you see us about what you've read in the draft plan. We definitely want more feedback. Okay. So we're going to move forward then without adopting a resolution, but instead with the intention to have another meeting to be scheduled where we will adopt a resolution with all of our comments included. All right. Hearing no objection, we're going to move forward with many, many thanks to Trish and Ben and Francie and Scott. Continues to be very impressive work. All of the engagement that's led up to this moment has been worth it. Somebody reminded me that I think we even mailed every single resident in the town at one point about this draft plan, if I remember correctly. So there's more to come, but we're getting there. So thank you very much. All right, Mr. Manager, next item. I know we're running a little behind, but I think we have time for this one last item.
There's one item on the other matters. It's a request for a minor modification to the Meadow Run conditional use permit. The town council is asked to consider approving a minor modification to the conditional use permit for Meadow Run subdivision to allow one additional home to be constructed within the subdivision. A resolution approving the modification is attached should the council decide to approve the request.
Thank you. Do we have a staff presentation? Somebody is raising their hand in the, Marty.
Marty's ready to help you.
Here he comes.
Waiting room. Thank you all.
All right, welcome, Marty.
Let me, good evening, everyone. Let me get my video started here. Hey.
Hey there.
Great. Yeah, thanks. I do have a brief presentation. I know it's been a fairly long evening so far, so I'll try to get through it quickly. And then I do believe the applicant, Mary, if you can pull over Dan Waugh and or Biz Preslar Marshall, if I have that name correct. I believe they may want to speak to you as well. Again, I'll try to be pretty quick with my presentation so we can get on since it's getting late. So yes, as the manager noted, it's minor modification to the CUP for Meadow Run. Oh, wait, I'm actually not in. Let me get into presentation mode here. Okay, is everyone seeing that now?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Thinking about it, it looks like it's. Does everyone else see the presentation on presentation mode?
Slide labeled overview.
Why don't you go ahead and we'll see how it works on my end.
Okay, great. This is a conditional use permit back from the early 90s, 1992 to be specific, which created 13 lots up off of Rogers Road on the west side of Rogers Road. 12 lots were approved for one single family home each. The remaining lot was a permanent open space. We didn't have the 40% open space requirement at the time. So the amount of open space is basically just remaining as an existing nonconformity. They're not decreasing that in any manner through this application. If
Marty, can I stop you there? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
I don't know if other council members are having the same problem I'm having. I'm not seeing this presentation in presentation mode. I'm still on the title slide. What about others?
Stop it and start it again and see if that might help.
Thank you very much. Now we're seeing your notes and everything, but that's fine unless you have any nasty comments about it in there.
No, those yeah, I'll just keep going for the sake of time here. That's talking about lighting. That's from an old presentation. So if you'll just focus on the left. Yeah, the remaining 13th lot was dedicated as permanent open space to the HOA. It happens to be over on the east side of Rogers Road in Chapel Hill's jurisdiction. And that becomes a pertinent issue as I move forward here. I'll talk about that a little more. If approved, this would allow one additional dwelling. No additional lots are created again. This would be a second home on the lot at 6005 Meadow Run Court. The HOA president has signed the application and they should be available here to answer any questions. The new home will be connected to a WASA, so it's not an additional septic field. The WASA infrastructure installed for the historic Rogers Road neighborhood happens to be adjacent to the property. There is additional density. There's enough land to support additional density. So there is the potential for a additional request in the future, but at this time, they're just asking for the one additional home. Next slide. Open space and rec facilities. Again, I mentioned the open spaces in Chapel Hill, and the original developer chose to do payments in lieu of providing recreation facilities. So there is an open space, but there are not actual commonly owned or utilized recreation facilities. The new house requires 10.39 recreation points. And discussing with the town attorney, we can't really allow them to put something in Chapel Hill's jurisdiction to satisfy a Carrboro requirement. So as explained in the agenda item and in this last bullet point here, there are two options. One, that a payment of approximately $2,100 be required, or that council choose to flexibly administer the recreation facility requirement. And I have the resolution here. And again, I've placed in the resolution either or option related to the recreation facilities. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Or again, Mr. Waugh may want to make some comments as well.
Hey, Mr. Waugh, do you have comments to make, or do you want us to proceed with our discussion? It's up to you.
If you don't mind, I'd like to just take a few minutes just to kind of set in place where we are, because it's a different part of Carrboro, or it's a higher end of Carrboro. This is our neighborhood. This is our community chessboard right in front of my house. And really, we are the farthest northern part of Carrboro. We're part of the northern annexation area. And so as you look, the town is kind of, the boundaries around our town is right up to where we are. So we are at the farthest edge. You can look at the elementary school is a little farther out perhaps. But our facilities for any kind of open space to meet these requirements is actually, as Marty said, we found out is across the street. When the city annexed us, we back when and now, our open space actually was not annexed. So any kind of plan that we had, actually my son came up with the idea that we were going to work with the HOA here and put out a dog park, dog open area. That was we were going to do our credits. But then got informed by the town here that actually wouldn't work because it was in the other area. It was in the Chapel Hill planning area. So I guess for that purpose, I would request to see if we could have that fee waived. The rest of what we're trying to do here is really in line with what your entire conversation for the last 2 hours have been. We're trying to increase the density. My parents are aging, and we're trying to bring them closer to us, build a small house that would be something they can age in place with. We've worked with our neighbors to expand our lot because we're rural residential zoning here. We were annexed. We used to be in the county, which meant that we had to have one house meant 1 acre. And so for a second house, maintaining that rural residential zoning, which is not really in the spirit of Carrboro, we have to expand to 2 acres. So our neighbor is like selling us a little bit of their land for really a pittance to allow us to get this enough land to 2 acres to build that small house. As you guys described it today, additional dwelling unit would have been preferred, but my parents reasonably wanted a little more than 700 square feet to live in. So that's why we're going this route. So it's in the spirit of that infill lot. The lots around us are all zoned half acre. We're kind of an anomaly here on the edge of Carrboro. So would appreciate kind of your help and to let this go forward with as less stress as possible. We've been working with Marty and the planning team for over a year now. It's been very slow going. I know it's a small little project. Hoping to get this done, and we might actually start to construct sometime and get my parents moving into Carrboro. So thanks very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dan. It's very helpful to have that background and a little bit of context. Would you mind unsharing your screen there when you...
I am desperately trying to unshare my screen.
Maybe
it's not letting me do it. There we go.
You're all set.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think the additional background is really helpful, and unless staff had something to kind of modify there or offer more information, I think that was really useful to me to understand what we're being faced with. So we had a request for a minor modification to this conditional use permit. The applicant cannot provide the recreational amenities as they normally would because we didn't annex their open space back when we annexed the neighborhood. Which seems to me personally like not really something that should be put on them, but it's on the town. But in any case, council members, how would you like to move forward?
Mayor, let me ask a point of clarification. And Mr. Is that Waugh?
Yes.
Waugh.
Very good. And nice to see you again. You were the only, I appreciated your coming to our neighborhood and knocking on our door, Barbara. So I really appreciated you when you came around.
I just have a question. So I believe I understand about the recreation facilities. And so I see payment in lieu, then I see flexible administration. So it seems like the flexible administration is what makes sense here if I'm thinking about it correctly.
I appreciate that.
Okay, got it. That was all. Just the point of clarification.
Thanks, Barbara. That's an important clarification. Sammy.
So it looks like we have the option of waiving this. And I think there's a third option, which is, while it may be true that a facility placed in Chapel Hill's jurisdiction can't satisfy a Carrboro ordinance requirement by the letter of the law in terms of that property technically not being part of that development. But in the spirit of the law, especially since Dan, you and your son were considering doing a dog park there, I don't see why we could do the waiving of the fee, but with the expectation that the dog park could be done there. And I think that would be really nice for the neighborhood too. After all, this is Rogers Road, and I think more neighbors technically could benefit from a dog park there.
it's a tough thing to do because that Rogers Road, I don't know if you live up near us, but people come off that curve at about 45, 55 miles an hour. Crossing that road is a real danger. And I like when my kids go to catch the bus up there, we had to work with the city so that the door could face our street, because people come barreling down that road. We're officially part of Carrboro, but it's the ragged edge of it. And also within our HOA, we have a mostly inactive HOA. So having to do anything there is a bit of a strain on us because we don't really have an HOA except for this purpose. Our Biz, unfortunately, our nominal HOA president couldn't stay on this late, but we really don't have an organization or the insurance to cover these things. We're not like one of the large developments down in Homestead or anything like that. We're just like 12 people that are on the same cul-de-sac. So I've already gone through some hoops to get the density here. I'd rather not be required to do more just to build the little house out there if we could avoid it.
I mean, I'm just saying, you're not required to do it because of the conditions of the space. So, and it sounded like you would have been willing to build there had those conditions not been there. And I was just thinking, if that were the case, then maybe that would be possible.
It was only really because the town was requiring it. It wasn't going to be an amenity that's actually usable. It was just like how we would meet this requirement the town was going to put on to us. And it was a unfunded mandate from my perspective.
Okay. I mean, I'm just thinking in terms of, what I'm thinking is that if the council were to decide that you would be required to pay the $2,000, I guess my question is, what would you rather do, the $2,000 or the park across the street? That's assuming that the council would want you to do the $2,000, which we may not.
I don't know. I mean, it's like this whole structure is set up here. We were like in the county, and it's set up as the county. The open space. None of us lived here when this was done back in 1985 and approved in 1990. So I'd rather not do any of it. Our neighborhood is more or less willing to let us set it up if I had to have a requirement. They've been really supportive about us wanting to do this, but it's not something that people wanted. And it's going to put a hardship on our neighborhood because suddenly if we put a dog park there, it's a great idea and I like it, but now we're going to have to get insurance there because other people will be coming through, and that's more fee and that's more structure we're going to have to put on it. And that means we're going to have to reinstantiate structure within our HOA that we haven't had to do before. It wouldn't necessarily be welcomed by the people living here for that reason, if that makes sense.
Okay, I got my answer and I appreciate it. I'm just interested in hearing other council members now. Appreciate it.
It's fair. It's a fair point. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. I guess I'd like to entertain a motion. I've sort of expressed what my preference is, but Sammy's going to pose the question about other options, and others haven't seemed to have an opinion. So I'll just entertain a motion. How about that?
I move we approve the conditional zoning with the flexible implementation of the recreation and parks consideration.
Thank you, Danny. Is there a
I'll second.
Been moved by Danny, seconded by Randy, that we adopt attachment A, I believe it is, Marty, which is the resolution approving the modification.
Yes.
With the option to have flexible administration of the requirement for recreation facilities. Is there any further discussion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Barbara?
Aye.
Randy?
Aye.
Danny?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Sammy?
Aye.
And I vote aye. The matter passes unanimously. Mr. Waugh, enjoy. Welcome to your parents.
Great. I will let them know this right after this call. Thank you very much. It is appreciated.
Thanks for hanging out with us for so long tonight.
It's been great. And please, rails to trails in the northern area would be outstanding. We would love to have that.
I would too. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And Marty, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Marty, I just want to say thank you for, it sounds like a lot of work had to go into this particular unusual scenario. So I appreciate everything that you do as usual.
Thank you.
Marty the man. Good night, Marty.
Good night.
Good night. Okay, are there any, let's see, let me get back to my agenda here. Any matters by council members, or are we ready to go to bed?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second, third, and fourth, everybody.
And seconded by Danny that we adjourn the meeting. I'll just, by acclamation, if you just raise your hand in your little box there. All right, matter passes unanimously. Mr. Manager, thank you so much.
Cool.
Mayor, thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Good night, guys.
Thank
And on the
you.
dot.
Thank you,
Thanks, y'all.
staff.